right. Well, so welcome, Mr. Adrian Rose. Thank you very much, sir, for agreeing to join me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honour to have been invited on, for sure.
Oh, I appreciate it. Obviously, relatively recently, I've made a visit over to your lab over at Holdenbrook Nurseries, which was awesome. What a phenomenal sort of setup that is. From start to finish. And I think when I came over there, I remember going there probably a decade ago when it was the garden kitchen, and then not realizing that was the place when we'd spoken previously that was where it was. But yeah, amazing. We had a really good chat there. We probably could have stuck a camera on there and recorded this podcast there. And then, to be fair,
It's often where some of the best conversations happen, isn't it? Just on the fly. But yeah,
that's
I
it.
have to say, I mean, Holden Clough have been phenomenally supportive of me and what it is I'm trying to achieve. So, big shout out to Holden Clough.
Yeah, 100%. And it is an amazing. I mean, just going to see that sort of Hungarian archway that goes into where the Tilbit is, it's worth just going to see for that.
Yeah.
For me personally. So, getting into the nooks and cranny and getting the initial bits out of the way. For those that don't know who you are, and obviously it's all going to be about mushrooms this episode, and herbal medicinal stuff. What for those that don't know you, what's your background? What's your history? Where do you come from? What have you done? So on and
Oh,
so
my
forth.
word.
We could be here for a while now. So
we could be here for a while. So, I mean, I've been kind of dipping in and out of the wellness industry for 25 years in other guises. I had a crystal business as well, and I wrote a best-selling book on crystals. But my kind of substantive role in life was I was a bushcraft and survival instructor. I used to teach people how to live off the land, wild foods, wild medicines, wild fungi, what you can eat, what you can't eat. And along with that, I also became a qualified master medicinal herbalist.
awesome. That, I mean, to be fair, in terms of like bushcraft and stuff, I know my daughter, she's 10 now, and that absolutely grabs her attention. She loves watching programs like Naked and Afraid, and we love Ed Stafford. Ed Stafford is like sort of
Yeah.
the god of bushcraft and survival when it comes to it. And I must admit, my own upbringing, I've always felt better and felt more natural when I'm out in the wilderness, and I think it's lacking a lot more now in youth culture. I know a lot of Esme's friends don't actually get out there, and don't actually get to go into the wilderness and into the woods and into the forest like where I take her. Obviously, why do you think it is? Why do you think that doesn't tend to happen?
I think possibly the digital revolution probably had an awful lot to do with that, where, children were more apt to stay on their phones and stay indoors. I think it is starting to change, though, with the advent of things like, the forest schools,
Yeah, yeah.
which are kind of really, they're great at encouraging kids to get outdoors, and the more clinical evidence that is coming around about how important it is for, people of all ages to get outdoors. But I mean, the reality is that no child will ever remember its best day in front of an Xbox,
No,
but
never.
you'll always remember a day, you and Esme sat around a campfire toasting marshmallows will be the best memory she'll ever have.
Or freezing and piss wet through in a tent, shivering.
Yeah, clutching onto a hot chocolate, shaking.
Yeah, 100. But it is the things that you remember. That you're right. Like that, even though at the time you wish you were anywhere else and warm and dry, it is that hindsight appreciation of like that was awesome. That was brilliant.
And we are in Britain. We're one of probably a handful of or probably the only possibly culture within Europe that doesn't embrace the outdoors as a way of life. All over Eastern Europe, Sweden, Switzerland, all of the Nordic nations, it's just accepted that you go out from a very early age, you walk around the woods. There's a cultural appreciation of wildlife and wild places. children are taught to light fires from a very early age. Sweden, kindergarten in Sweden, they take kids out, get them suited and booted, go out into the snow, learn how to light fires, learn how to use knives safely,
Yeah.
and they're raised with that as being part of their culture.
And I think not only does it teach you stuff that ultimately might save your life one day,
Mm.
but it's also that I mean I've experienced it firsthand. There's that mental resilience and that mental strength that it sort of instills within young people of when something's difficult. And you'll have done it when you get to the bottom of a mountain and you think,
Mm.
fucking hell, that's high. and then 4 or 5 hours later you're
Mm.
down at the other side and you're at the bottom and you think, bloody hell, I did that. And
Mm.
it's that sort of next time you come up against a mountain and it looks big, I've done it before. I can
Mm.
do it again.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things when I used to teach a lot of kids and young people, was that a lot of the skills that you learn outdoors are quite analogous of life.
Yeah,
So, and I always used to start each session by saying, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And you'd get these wonderful answers like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a footballer, I want to be this. And say, okay, well, what's your route to success? How are you going to get there? And
yeah,
then I'd use firelighting as a means of showing them. So you can't take a log, put a match underneath a log and expect it to just ignite. It just doesn't work. So you can't have that easy access into the life you want. But if you take some very fine tinder, some small stuff, bigger stuff, bigger stuff, bigger stuff, until eventually you've got that fire going. And that to them, because you could see it in a very physical sense, that it took lots of small steps to get to where you want to go. And I think that's sometimes the issue with our modern world in this digital age, where people have instant fame and it
yes,
doesn't seem like they have to work for it. It's like you're almost famous for being famous, and that's it.
yeah, and yeah. They're famous for not even being famous for something that we won't go down that route because I've got my own views on that. Where people have got hundreds of thousands of followers, and I think, for what?
And most of that is a vanity metric anyway, isn't it?
Of course it is, and
Yeah.
this we were I was having this conversation with the previous guest in terms of the whole the thing that's different about um, this podcast and what I've sort of tried to really ground this in is the fact that selfishly it's people I want to speak to that I'm really interested in, and they've got expertise that I almost wish I had, but
Mhm.
I want to learn from them and I want to listen to them, whether they've got an amazing story or somebody like yourself that has a, a greater knowledge and a passion that I already have.
Mhm.
So it is a vanity project in that sense, but at the same time, I'm well aware that the things that we're going to be talking about on here, for instance, I've helped my partner with her energy through
Mhm.
using Cordyceps.
Mhm.
Now, if somebody's at home and they've tried the Pro Plus and they've tried the caffeine and they've tried the exercise and they've tried this and they've tried whatever might have been prescribed by a friend or doctor,
Mhm.
and they're at the wit's end and the borderline narcolepsed, then this might just help them. And me and you both know that cordyceps taken with the right blends and the right uptake and the right in the right manner will 100% help them.
Definitely.
And it's that sort of ethos that I'm kind of going into this with. If it helps one person, then it's 100% worth it.
Yeah, and I think that's the benefit or the beauty of a podcast like this one, is that there are so many out there that that they'll come on and go, look at this product. This is an
Yeah.
amazing product. I've been taking this now for weeks and I feel amazing. They haven't. They
No.
opened the packet today and they held it up and they said how good it was, and then they put it in the drawer with all the other thousands of packets of things that they've been sent by somebody to promote.
Yeah. And well, that's the thing with sort of I would never advertise anything, or I would never show anything that I wouldn't fully recommend, trust, or use myself.
Hmm.
And ultimately, I've been offered uh, deals and I've been offered money to advertise certain brands and products. That one of them being alcohol. I don't drink alcohol. I'm
Mhm.
not promoting it. I will turn it down flatly because I don't believe in it as a thing. Now that's not me to demonize anybody that does like a beer. It's just my morals, and I won't
Mhm.
betray them for anybody.
And it's
So,
quite refreshing to hear that from someone.
oh, thank you. But I've been down that route,
Mm.
and don't get me wrong, I could do it, and I probably wouldn't lose sleep at night. But at
Mm.
the same time, it's almost betraying what's at the core of this.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to sort of keep. So, coming from a master medicinal herbalist, and an outdoorsman, and bushcraft, and even crystals that we can sort of touch on later, because
Mm.
that's a fascinating subject that I love to speak about. How did you make the transition into mushrooms from that? I mean, I understand the link between bushcraft,
Mm.
because edible mushrooms, beefsteak, and honey fungus, and so on and so forth. But in terms of, is it a marriage of the bushcraft and master medicinal herbalist, and
Um,
you think, oh, there's the avenue?
Sort of. I mean, I blame my wife entirely. It's all her fault, and I have no hesitation in blaming my wife whatsoever. So, um, a few years ago, Louise, my wife, became perimenopausal,
Right.
and one of the unfortunate avenues or side effects of perimenopause is brain fog,
Mm.
and that's all to do with women, unfortunately, are not designed to live as long as they do. Unfortunately, Mother Nature says, well, you've had kids, you've raised them a little bit. Thanks very much, and get your coat.
Put out to pasture,
Put out to
so to
pasture. So,
speak. Yeah.
so the body starts to die back, and then you have these kind of dendrite pathways and neurons in the brain that do start to die back, because if the brain dies, the body with us.
Yeah.
That's nature, unfortunately. And what happens is with women who are in states of perimenopause and menopause, is that those dendrites and neural pathways in the brain, start to die back. She was put onto HRT. And she's an intelligent lady, my wife. She's a professional tarot reader. She talks to people for a living. But unfortunately, she was struggling to complete sentences. And this is something that
Wow.
I'm sure all of the perimenopausal, menopause, and postmenopausal women that are listening to the podcast, it will resonate with, because you get so frustrated that you can't get your words out, you can't remember names. It's on the tip of the tongue, you just can't seem to get it out. She was put on, she went to the doctors. A male doctor put her on HRT, and I'm sure, I'm not going to pull apart HRT. I'm sure for some women, it's
Yeah.
wonderful and it's a lifesaver and it's a great thing for them. But for my wife, and I'm sure lots of other women, it just didn't work. She became hyper emotional, very teary, and it just wasn't working. And as a husband of 25 years next year, it
Oh,
was very.
congratulations!
Thank you.
You get less for murder.
Yeah, it was very difficult for me to see, and I was finding it frustrating for her and on her behalf that she was really struggling. So I decided that because I was a master medicinal herbalist, I wanted to find something of more of a natural path route to go down, potentially as an adjuvant treatment for it to run alongside the HRT.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very quickly went down a rabbit hole of trying to find something which I'm apt to do. I've got one of those brains that I just, when I get into a subject, I just devour it. And if it's ever
Yeah.
been written, filmed, spoke about, I'll find it and
And
I'll research it.
before you know it, a week has gone, and you raise your head above the
Yeah, yeah,
parapet,
and then
dishevelled.
look in a shadow of my former self, eyes bleeding. Yeah, and I very quickly found out about a mushroom called lion's mane mushroom, Hericium erinaceum, and all of the benefits that mushroom has. Again, I thought, well, I need to know all of this. I need to know everything about this. Went down another series of rabbit holes, and by the time I came up, I ended up being a fully qualified mycologist as well. Because one of those devouring brains.
Yep.
And that was the very first mushroom I ever actually grew myself, and they're
Oh,
very
wow.
easy to grow.
Yeah.
And I grew a lion's mane mushroom, which is actually it's worth noting it's actually an endangered species within Britain, so you cannot
Right.
pick it in the wild. It's an offence to pick it in the wild. So please don't, none of your listeners go out there and start trying to
Definitely
harvest it
not.
from the wild.
I
But
mean,
it's
I
incredibly easy
wouldn't.
to grow.
I wouldn't advise anybody to pick any mushroom in the wild unless you're with a fully qualified mycologist, because there is mushrooms that look just like edible mushrooms that definitely not edible
Yeah,
mushrooms.
I think, was it Terry Pratchett that said you can eat any mushroom once, some you can only eat once? I think it's very true.
I've always wondered. You obviously now you're a fully qualified mycologist, and you know all the sort of edible ones and the dangerous ones and the psychedelic ones and so on and so forth. And there's still more being discovered daily. I always think about the first person. How many people have died to discover which ones were edible and which ones weren't edible.
It's a question that comes up all the time in any branch of foraging. Really, is that how do we know that A was toxic, B was poisonous, C was quite edible, D was really tasty?
Well, that was poor Terry. Poor Terry. Poor Terry. We don't eat this because
Yeah,
Terry's led out at back 6 foot under.
yeah. Terry had some. He's no good, so we'll avoid that one. Yeah, Dave's around the back of the bush, and everything's fallen out of him. So we might need to reduce the amount that we eat. But yeah, yeah, lion's mane was the first mushroom I ever grew. And I again didn't want, and I'm sure we'll come on to discuss this, but I didn't want to go, okay, there it is, have it.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn why it worked, how it worked, what was the best route to delivery
Yeah.
for that mushroom, rather than just cooking it in a pan and eating it.
Well,
I wasn't.
that's half the battle with a lot of sort of these medicinal mushrooms and medicinal foods in total. So you look at people, that say take the castor oil and oil of oregano, and it's not just ingesting. You have to figure out the best chemical way, because there's a lot of, especially with the fungi, and I know this as do you. There's very different ways to break down the chemical makeup of a fungi and of a mushroom, and half of it, if you don't do it properly, will just pass through you, and you won't get any benefit whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think this is we're probably going to come on to that shortly. And I did a ton of research. I remember being up at 3 o'clock in the morning reading a 1,049-page study by the University of Queensland, as you do at 3 o'clock
Yeah,
in the morning,
yeah, I've been
when
there.
you've got no other part of life that's very interesting. When you get to
Yeah.
55 and you're quite boring.
Oh well, that says something for me at 37, because I find myself thinking, oh, I better go to sleep now. It's 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and I read this. I read this report. It was a 4-year-long study by the University of Queensland in Australia, and it was all about how to extract and the best route to delivery to be the most efficacious product that you could have for the delivery of all. We've got to be careful, really. I think we probably have to caveat this with saying that we're legally not allowed to call any mushroom medicinal.
True.
Because there's all kinds of regulations. There's THR regulations, MHRA regulations that will kind of jump all over us for doing that. And I wouldn't want to go down that route of saying that mushrooms are medicinal in that sense, because you don't want to give people false hope. Whilst there is a ton of evidence, and I'm sure we will, I really want to talk more about the medicinal
We will.
aspects of mushrooms. But long story short, with my wife, I learned how to extract the compounds properly out of the mushrooms, made a double extracted tincture, which is what the University of Queensland said was the most efficacious way to do it, 7 times more effective than a powder.
Wow.
And powders, I hope we'll come on to that.
We will. We will. We've got
Good
it
stuff.
all to
And
come.
probably within and during that period of research, my wife decided to give up the HRT. It wasn't good. It really wasn't good. And she just decided, no, I can't continue with this. So the lion's mane became no longer an adjuvant medication to run, or an adjuvant treatment, I should say, to run alongside a HRT. She pulled herself off the HRT and was then only taking the lion's mane double extracted tincture. And I would say within 4 or 5 weeks, she was back to the lady that I'd married 25 years ago.
Wow.
And it was phenomenal to see the difference in her. And then my brain instantly went, shit, if this works for her with this one mushroom, what else is out there? And all of a sudden, my brain started to spiral in all sorts of different directions as to what other mushrooms are out there, what other medicines are available, what else can I do to help people? And that then spawned the whole Pendle Mushroom Company being born. And it was born of a desire to help people to access adjuvant therapies based on science as
Well,
opposed to
the,
hogwash bullshit and smoke and mirrors that you find on the internet.
a profit.
And lots of profit, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the way I've always looked at sort of it's sort of quite commonly said it's a British thing that I don't go to the hospital unless my leg's falling off or something like if I've got a little bit of a cold, then I used to have, before I gave up alcohol, I used to have a hot toddy. That was it, and for those that don't know what a hot toddy is, whiskey, honey, lemon, hot water. And it used to have one of them, couple of paracetamol, and away you go, and you're generally okay. And then vice versa, I think for eons, centuries and thousands of years, medicinal foods, which is ultimately what a fungi is, or a herbal food, or even even herbs in itself. There was a study, and I mentioned oil of oregano before. There was a student, a high school student in America that entered into a science. I think they have a science fair, don't they, or a science competition, and he compared amoxicillin, which is a readily available and prescribed antibiotic, to oil of oregano, and oil of oregano was 10 times more powerful of an antibiotic than amoxicillin, and not toxic. If you have amoxicillin, I don't know whether anybody knows, but it takes your body 7 years to recover all the good bacteria that your gut needs from amoxicillin, which is why you can't take it again and again and again. Whereas oil of oregano, because it's natural, it doesn't kill the good bacteria within your gut. It works with it
Correct.
to kill the bad bacteria. Now, if a science student at like teenage years can enter that into a science fair in a high school, why aren't pharmaceutical companies looking or even, but then again, you've got to hold your tongue and you can't be slanderous, but at the same time, there's no money in it. I understand that.
Yeah.
But then for me, and this is like coming back to the whole meaning behind the podcast, is information like that needs to be readily available for people to make their own goddamn mind up.
100%. I mean, that's the beauty with America is they are very much around citizen science.
Yes.
And I love citizen science, and that's the beauty of the mycology world, is that there are an awful of amateur mycologists, scientists that are out there, amateur scientists, citizen scientists that are doing amazing work with fungi. There's a fella, I want to give a shout out to a fella in the States. He's called Andrew Reed, and he owns a business called Mossy Creek Mushrooms in America. And he has the biggest brain of any human. He's like Megamind when it comes to mushrooms. He's just absolutely genius, and he does all this crazy scientific work, all to do with citizen science around mushrooms. And the guy is just, I wish I had 1% of his knowledge. I really do. But yeah, I think England, the UK is starting to catch up in terms of citizen science. But I think I don't know whether it's because we're an island nation, I don't know, but we seem to be detached almost from the rest of the world when it comes to citizen science.
I think it probably ties in with what you said previously in terms of there's not really that outdoorsy kind of culture from an early age, if that makes sense. I know when I've taken my daughter out in the wilderness, I've had the comments of "you're crazy, you're off your head," and it's like, well, no, because she's learning things that unfortunately your children will never learn until they get a little bit older. And I think maybe that contributes to the fact that that sort of slow to catch up in terms of sort of natural. I want to say homeopathic, but it's not really homeopathic remedies. But that used to be. I remember my nana. That was the thing. It wasn't. It was mint tea if you had like a sniffly nose and so on and so forth. And maybe that's what sort of contributes to them not being as much of a culture for it.
Yeah, I think you could look at history quite easily within the UK and actually see the decline of how herbs were used medicinally in Britain, and there's real pioneers, Culpeper being one of them, who wrote probably what is one of the best materia medica books ever written on herbs and herbs as medicines and as medications and as therapies. But there's a very clear decline within the UK, and that is based around us being dominated by the Romans, who had their own way of kind of getting rid of paganism. And then, of course, the churches came in and they then did away with paganism, and anybody that had herbal medicines or herbal tinctures were witches. I mean, I'm looking at
the witch trials. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, it's called the Pendle Mushroom Company because as I look out of my window in front of me, I've got Pendle Hill, which is obviously famous the world over for the Pendle witches and the Pendle witch trials. And so the church demonized the use of herbs a lot because. And then, of course, you got misogyny came in where, you could only ever have male doctors, that would treat people. So I think that there was this definite decline of use of herbs as medicines within the UK. And you could lay the blame of that very squarely at the fact that we were, the Romans came in, then Christianity came in and misogyny and one thing and another.
Yeah, I must admit it's logical when you follow it in that sense, and ultimately, I think from that standpoint, and I mean, you mentioned a couple of people from the States. I mean, I first got turned on to the sort of psychedelic element of mushrooms through listening to a episode of Joe Rogan when he had Graham Hancock on there. And obviously, I'd heard of them growing up, and as a youth, and magic mushrooms, and it just wasn't a thing that you sort of it wasn't a party drug that you did when you grew up, because that was, in my ear, it was ecstasy and MDMA and all that sort of stuff, which is now kind of being used in a medicinal sense in its own right. And then through that episode of understanding. I did my own research and then started listening to Paul Stamets, who's like literally
all hail Paul Stamets.
Yeah, the mushroom god, if that's a good word to describe him. And the research and the advocacy that he's sort of spearheaded, one just for psilocybin. Mushrooms, as well as every other type of medicinal mushroom that falls underneath that, I think has paved the way for countries like ours to sort of start catching up to, it does work. However, we'll get onto sort of the psilocybin stuff a little bit later, but I want to touch on what's happened relatively recently, and you've just informed me off camera of another one that's sort of been prohibited in the UK. So I've done this research, and when I came over to your lab and I spoke about turkey tail, and you informed me then that turkey tail had been...
this is the point at which I'm probably going to swear quite a bit on the podcast now, so I apologise in advance.
It's fine. It's called Cut the Shit for a reason. So, and obviously, I'd known turkey tail is predominantly is still used, I think, over in China and the Orient, based on a cancer treatment. That's what it's used for. And I've looked at the wording of why they've decided to revoke or what's it put the label? Is it a novel food? Is that what the label is?
Yeah. So So the novel foods regulation pretty much states, and it is insanity on the face of it. It is just madness.
Yeah.
But even though we left the EU, seemingly, apparently, we didn't.
No.
We are still governed by lots and lots and lots of EU regulations, and one of which is the novel foods regulation, which basically states that anything that wasn't consumed by a fair percentage of the population pre-May the 15th, 1997, gets put on to this novel foods regulations. I mean, a good example is chia seeds. Nobody had heard of chia seeds until, a few years ago. So chia seeds was put onto that novel foods regulation. Somebody then has to be brave enough to step forward and say, well, okay, I've done the research into chia seeds. They're not harmful. This is all the scientific evidence to prove that it's not harmful. And therefore, once the novel foods regulatory body is happy and is satisfied that it is not dangerous, then it comes off of the novel foods regulation and can be consumed all over England, UK, Europe. They fairly recently put on turkey tail, Trametes versicolor. It's a very easy to identify mushroom.
It looks like a tail of a turkey.
It looks like the tail of a turkey.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's a very small mushroom, probably 2 or 3 inches at most wide. A very thin bracket fungus. You often find trees that have either fallen over or been chainsawed into logs, and it will grow out of the end of the logs. You often find log piles with them growing out of the end, and you'll find hundreds and hundreds of these tiny thin brackets, and they look like a turkey tail.
So
look at that.
There you go.
And as if by magic, there we go, look at that. And it does look like a turkey tail.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is used the world over as an adjuvant therapy in the treatment of cancer and for people undergoing chemotherapy. It's actually prescribed in Japan as an adjuvant medication for people undergoing cancer treatment and chemotherapy. And it's probably worth a good hat tip here to the Far East, who are light years, easily light years ahead of us in terms of mushroom production, fungi science, fungi from a medicinal point of view.
Well, they've been using turkey tail or documented using turkey tail for over 3,000 fucking years.
Yeah, it's the same with like things like reishi, Ganoderma species.
Yeah.
The very first ever recorded materia medica, the very first medicinal use of herbs, mushrooms, etc., was written in China over 2,500 years ago, and it's documented in there that it is being used widely already at that point.
Now, if that's not proof that we've been consuming it for quite a while, then...
But the issue is we haven't been consuming it within the UK and Europe. And the bit that absolutely grinds my gears, and I really am trying not to swear here, but it's going to happen, is that turkey tail is non-toxic, it is non-hallucinogenic, it is non-psychoactive. There are no harmful chemicals within it. In America, it's actually known, I believe it's called hillbilly chewing gum, where you just rip it off. Because when it's young, it's quite chewy. It's a bit earthy, but they can rip it off and just chew it like you would do chewing gum. So it has no deleterious effects whatsoever. There is a ton of research abroad to show its ability to fight cancers and turn off cancer's ability to cloak itself, to be immunosupportive, as all mushrooms are, immunosupportive, supportive in every aspect. And then what we do is we ban the fucking stuff. Why? I was always going to swear, buddy. It was always going to happen.
It's fine by me, honestly.
I cannot understand how a mushroom, a product, whatever it may be, that is absolutely proven to be helpful gets banned. And I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist at all.
I can testify to that.
However, when something which is so good at helping with cancer is banned, I'm sure every single audience member you've got watching this podcast now is throwing their cups across the room and screaming, big pharma, the bastards.
Yeah.
And it's true. I can't think of any other reason why it would be banned.
Well, it doesn't make, and this, we've spoken several times before, and the thing, I think, and coming back to your point in terms of, I think there's been a slight change in the UK in regards to sort of homeopathic and natural sort of remedies for things since COVID. Because I think people saw in COVID the hypocrisy and the illogicality
Yeah.
of one of the rules, because the rules didn't make sense whatsoever. You know, you've got to. I mean, I remember being in a pub in the Lake District where you had to put a mask on from the door, and it's so laughable now in hindsight. You had to put a mask on at the door to walk to your table, and then you could take your mask off to eat, and then you had to put your mask on to go to the toilet if you wanted to go. And it was. I mean, I'm a very, I'm a law-abiding citizen, but if the law isn't logical, in all due respect, stick it up your ass. I'm not doing it because it's not logical.
Yeah.
And the thing is with what COVID showed us is and I think even more so now, and just bringing to light in terms of the issues around. So I know it's a sort of different subject, but anthropology. There's so many of these experts constantly saying that they know the best thing and they've discovered this and and this is the best treatment and that is the best treatment. And then you've got experts recently saying, well, the humans have only been on this planet for 250,000 years, not a day earlier, not a day sooner, and this, that, the other. Then they've just found a 1,000,000-year-old skull in China, which basically says, shut the F up, you're lying. Then on top of that, for all my life, chimps are 99% identical to us, 99% identical DNA, and it's now just been proven that they're not 99%. It's actually a 14% difference, which is quite fucking big in terms of DNA.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you know, it's these discoveries again, and James Webb Telescope that they pointed at a piece of blank sky. They thought nothing was there, and you'll have seen the images that have come out of that thing. When are humans ever going to learn that they actually know sweet FA and be human? You know, Göbekli Tepe is another one. When they find, you know, Stonehenge is the oldest megalithic structure in the world. Nothing's ever older than this. And then lo and behold, a Turkish farmer stumbles on a rock and boom, there you go.
7,000 years older.
And it's just, how many times does this have to happen? Before
most of this, I think, though, I mean, to answer the question, I think most of this is ego-driven.
This episode is sponsored by the Pendle Mushroom Company, pioneers in the world of functional fungi. They grow, harvest and dual extract every mushroom right here in the UK, from lion's mane to cordyceps, for maximum purity, potency and sustainability. Whether you're looking to boost focus, energy or overall well-being, their tinctures are the real deal. No imported powders, no fillers, just science-backed mushrooms done right. And because you're part of the Cut the Shit community, you can get 10% off all tinctures with the code CTS10 at pendlemushroomco.com. That's CTS10 for 10% off. Unlock the power of nature with the Pendle Mushroom Company. Yes.
And, you know, you've got an awful lot of professors who made their name by saying that Stonehenge being a prime example, you know, there's so many professors, excuse me, so many professors made their name and their books and their reputation based on the fact that absolutely not. We know everything there is to know about mankind. There's no way that anything could ever be. So no megalithic or large stone structure could exist older than Stonehenge, 5,000 years old. Absolutely not. Nothing could happen. Bang, as you say, a little boy out herding goats in Turkey trips over a brick and it turns out to be Göbekli Tepe, Christ knows how many times the size and infinitely more intricate. In terms of the 3D relief carvings, the positioning of stones.
I mean, the
pillars, Göbekli Tepe, which is 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. So science effectively is right until it's not.
Yeah, and I think the thing is for me in terms of you know bringing it back to medicine. I mean, this is just bringing up the images of some of the pillars at Göbekli Tepe to show how it is nothing like sort of Stonehenge in any sense of the word. Like that pillar there
Yeah, 3D relief carving with the famous handbags,
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll get into the
which is probably
handbags.
another podcast.
Oh, in
So
itself, I know.
yeah,
But it's that, carving is carving, but to carve in relief is
it's a
it
different
show
beast.
it. It is completely a different beast, and it's one of those for me where you can't even liken it to Stonehenge in
No,
the slightest. Stonehenge
no,
is almost like
no.
discovering the wheel, whereas Göbekli Tepe is like the full blown motor car.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, relating it back to sort of medicines and treatments and sort of remedies is, don't get me wrong, and I can only go off my personal experience, especially with sort of the psilocybin and the psychedelics, is the fact that I know I'm not naive enough to think it won't work for everybody.
Mhm.
It's not, if somebody's had a very traumatic life, I would approach anything to do with psychedelics very, very, very carefully, if at all, because I know, and that psilocybin or a proper trip done in the right setting breaks you down to the point where you question everything about your own self, and it really turns that spotlight inward. And if that spotlight's there and shines on things that you're not ready for, it can derail you
Yeah,
for a long
for
time.
sure. Yeah, for sure. I think you were just about to. We were talking about turkey tail.
Yeah.
Before we come on to
So
psilocybin, because there is some wonderful evidence around and some incredible research been done on psilocybin and psilocin. But we were talking about turkey tail and how they ban it, and then I was telling you just off camera that we've I've
the
just literally
cordyceps.
found out that Cordyceps, which is probably most of your audience will know Cordyceps from is it The Last of Us computer
Yes.
game and
Yeah. The
a
it's like a
dramatization.
parasitical.
Yeah, and
A
it's a
lot of the
phenomenal. Yeah,
parasitical
it's a
fungus.
phenomenal organism, but I've just recently found out that Cordyceps has also been put onto the novel foods register as well.
Which, for what reason as well? Is there a reason for?
Well, again, the outside reason is that it wasn't consumed into any great amount prior May 15th, 1997. However, there is lots and lots and lots
Oh,
of oh, hello, what's
yeah,
going on?
we'll get off that one.
So yeah, so there was lots and lots and lots of research being done into the medicinal benefits of cordyceps. And that one that's on screen now is actually there's two main types of cordyceps. There's Cordyceps sinensis, which is the one that inhabits kind of insects and
Yeah,
beetles, etc. Just to put everyone's mind at risk who have at rest. Sorry, not at risk, at rest of the people that have watched The Last of Us and get a bit worried about this zombie fungus, is that the one that infects beetles and insects is Cordyceps sinensis, and the one that is being used
that's
that is grown
that's
commercially is
that's the one that
Cordyceps
you mean.
militaris. Yeah, so the one so
So, perfect
that looks like me
example.
on a Sunday morning.
Last of us. Well, is that when you've been working in the lab and you fall asleep on the pink
Yeah,
oysters?
yeah, and I wake up and I've got something growing out of my ear. But yeah, so the one that's kind of used as a food source in a lot of Chinese cooking is Cordyceps militaris, which is grown commercially all over the world. But there is once again a huge body of evidence and clinical research and RCTs being done towards cordyceps's ability and cordycepin, which is one of the active compounds within cordyceps, to fight cancer.
Wow.
What a surprise! So we all know that, or people that are in the know that cordyceps is wonderful for energy. It contains a high level of
Yep.
ATP, adenosine triphosphate, so it gives you phenomenal amounts of energy. It's good for mental acuity, mental alertness. It will keep you going more than coffee does, because whilst coffee is a wonderful thing, I don't think I could live without coffee. When you get to my age, it's less of a drink and more of a medication. but but cordyceps will give you energy. It tops you up on ATP, adenosine triphosphate, as I said, and it has all sorts of other wonderful things. It's immunomodulatory, it's supportive, it's good for joint pain, etc., etc. But the key research that's being done at the moment is into its ability to interrupt the DNA strands of cancer.
Wow.
So
So it's at that sort of cellular level. That's where it.
yes, yes. So
Right.
what happens is cordycepin, and they're trialing. In fact, it's just finished phase one trial, and there's lots of phases when they test drugs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just finished phase one trial, and it's a drug called NUC 7738, which is being used to help with cancer. What cordycepin effectively does is it bonds itself into the DNA strand of cancerous cells and interrupts it. It's what's actually known as a reverse transcriptase inhibitor. So,
Right.
so if you get a virus in your body, that virus then touches something, and you've now got two infected cells. They go off and they touch something else, 4, 8, 16, 30, and so on. It becomes a much bigger beast.
Yeah.
What cordycepin can do is it actually interrupts that process and halts it. And it was first tested in vitro and then in vivo. In vitro being in cells, so like cell cultures, and then in vivo being within animals, so typically mice.
Yeah.
And it was found that it actually interrupted the spread of two very harmful viruses, hepatitis B being one of them, and HIV being the other
Wow.
one.
Oh, wow.
No, so I'm 55 years old. If I go back to 1985, when I was 15 and knew everything, because all 15-year-olds knew everything, of course, and the HIV and AIDS was a worldwide, kind of epidemic. And I said back then, well, mushrooms can help that. You'd have been locked up for criminal insanity.
Oh,
You'd have
yeah.
just been
Well,
banged up. But it is now accepted science. And the problem from a medicinal point of view with cordycepin is a few things. So first of all, it's the delivery system within the body. The second is the fact that it actually degrades very quickly within the body. So there was a company, I think the company is called Protide, who developed this drug called NUC 7738, which has more of a longevity in terms of coming into the body, and it allows that cordycepin and it's been somewhat altered to make it more efficacious, that it then bonds with, and I won't go into too much science on this because it probably bore everyone to tears,
no, go do it.
but it
It's the
effectively bonds
whole
into
point.
that.
It's the whole
It
point. Let's
effectively
bore
bonds
people.
into that. It effectively bonds into. There you go. NUC 773. Now, I really want to caveat this with it is extraordinarily early science.
Yeah.
So I don't want anybody running out and going to their doctors and saying, I want, a bottle of NUC 7738, please. It is not commercially available. Anyone that's selling it as being commercially available is lying. It hasn't. It's only barely got to phase 2 of the study. So it is extraordinarily early days. So, and I do think that's important to say, that we don't want anyone running out
But
and trying to get hold of this stuff.
at the same time, I mean, I thank you for bringing this to my attention, because this will be my rabbit hole tonight. Aid, thank you very much for that.
No problem. Enjoy the sleep.
So when I'm recording tomorrow and my eyes are like this, I've got you to
it's
thank.
my fault. Okay.
Yeah. However, like, it is really good, and I don't want to sort of be the Debbie Downer on this in terms of how amazing this is, and even if it doesn't come to any fruition, and it actually proves that it doesn't work, it was a good avenue to go down. It will advance research in some other aspects, in whatever capacity. But I look back to the 70s and the birth of the war on drugs, and how magic mushrooms and psilocybin at the time was so demonized to the point that I think it must have had almost like a rippling effect on all types of mushrooms, whether they were psychedelic or not. And this research has been delayed probably 30 years because
Yeah.
of that stigma and that sort of yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's
I
so
think, yeah, I think that coupled with the fact that science technology has to catch up.
yes.
DNA sequencing is a very new subject. If you think about, DNA mapping is very, very new
But
science.
we only discovered sort of DNA stuff in was it the 90s or late 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like
So,
it is in the eyes of technology, it is very very new.
yeah. But
Um,
I think for me, it's, you have to think, well, you're quite right. We look at the science now. We're banning things left, right, and centre, and you've got to ask yourself why. And I think that you say you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to
no,
work out why. You know,
yeah, well, money makes the world
but
go round.
absolutely. But I think that we are. The wonderful thing about the internet is a very double-edged sword, isn't it? It can be a very good thing, it can be a very bad thing. But the wonderful thing about the internet is that it is very forensic, and it allows people to research as much as they can. There is open source information out there, and it allows people like myself, citizen scientists, to start talking about this. And it's thanks to podcasts like yours that you can start, as you say, cutting through the shit
Yeah,
and saying, well, actually, this thing's out there, this thing's out there, this thing's out there, and actually getting that message out. And the more people that hear the message about things like NUC 7738, I do hope we come on to, how, we're going to talk about the wonderful effects medicinally and psychologically on psilocin and psilocybin.
yeah. Well,
That
that's
once that
the other
becomes
thing.
a matter of a conversation that isn't hidden, it's not a dirty subject, it's not something that's talked about in the shadows, but if we can bring that out into the bigger world and let's have adult conversations about that isn't framed around, chasing dragons around. It isn't framed around, madness or people going bonkers or, trying to, earn loads of money out of it, but actually have, some proper fucking adult conversation about it.
And that's part and parcel of sort of, you mentioned about the psilocin and whatnot, and as you've been sort of presenting this information, and this is how my sort of brain works. We haven't spoke about NUC 7738 off screen, or even when I came over to your lab, and I'm just sort of like automatically connecting the dots that if Cordyceps is an inhibitor, and psilocin has been proven to possibly extend cell life of up to 50%, which scientists can quite relatively easily, if they can extend it, they can reverse engineer it to decelerate
Yes.
cell life.
Yeah.
And then you've got turkey tail for the autoimmune. Like you've almost got a perfect cocktail there for
Yeah.
a universal cancer treatment across the board, and not just cancer treatment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any tumor or any growth, whether it be benign or whatever, it's almost like the perfect cocktail. And the kicker, it's all fucking natural.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is most of our medicines nowadays come from, and you have to look at like Culpepper's book to know that most of our medicines do come from natural sources.
Well, yeah, all
Aspirin,
the
comes
opiates
from,
comes from
yeah, all
poppy.
the opiates are poppies. Aspirin comes from willow trees. Taxol, which is a wonderful anti-cancer drug, comes from yew trees. Digoxin, which is a wonderful heart drug, comes from digitalis, the foxglove plant, and the list goes on and on and on and on. There is some incredible research being done around a mushroom called chaga fungus that
Oh, chaga,
grows
yeah.
only on silver birch trees, to do with breast cancer or to do with betulin oil and how that interacts with cancerous cells. But yeah, all of the answers are there in nature. They are all there to be found, and it is just how we look for them. And I think we have to put on a different pair of glasses now.
Yes.
I think that what was once seen as, the dark arts and the mystics should now be looked at, and and psilocybin was looked at as being, just some crazy ass drug that got people tripping their tits off. We are now starting to look at it, those types of natural drugs, through a different lens,
Yeah,
and
and
seeing how important that they really are.
it's it is, and it's one thing that's never sort of sat right with me in terms of, you know, since I've become a little bit more aware and self-aware in terms of medication, like, and I only found out this the other day actually from my auntie, that my nana who was my idol. She was pretty much addicted to ibuprofen,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that, you know, it basically burnt holes in her stomach lining left, right, and center. Whereas I know now that there is miles better anti-inflammatories that are natural,
Mm-hmm.
that don't have any negative effects whatsoever.
Extra virgin olive oil.
There you go. There's one.
Extra virgin oil contains a compound called oleocanthal, and oleocanthal is kind of nature's anti-inflammatory. And I read somewhere many years ago that 1 tablespoon of extra, it has to be extra virgin olive oil.
Mm-hmm.
Extra virgin olive oil contains the same amount of anti-inflammatory properties as I think it was 125 milligrams of ibuprofen.
Wow.
But it has to be extra virgin olive oil because it has a higher density of this compound called oleocanthal.
And obviously, and it's the same sort of story now, you know, and we might touch on this later, but I used to love going shopping at the supermarket. Food shopping used to be my
What's wrong with you?
favorite time. It used to be my favorite time of the month. You just go into the food shop. Oh yeah,
You
we'll have a bit of that, have
absolute
a bit
weirdo.
of that. However, now I absolutely despise it because, you know, you're buying honey, for instance, and honey comes from several different sources, and now research suggests that mixed honey is basically just syrup. It's
Yeah,
not. It's
it's
not
not
actual
close to honey.
honey. And the same with the olive oil
Mm-hmm.
is, if it comes from multiple sources, then it's not. Well, it's no good. But they do it because obviously they're probably scraping the bottom of the barrel and feeding us the crap. But then when you look at sort of the science, and there must be something there. I remember watching the documentary on the blue zones across the
Mm-hmm.
planet, which is, for those that don't know, it's they've got the highest number of centurions per capita within that area, and I think there's 8 across the world. 2 of them are in Italy.
Mm-hmm. Well, you only have
Um,
to look at the Mediterranean diet to show that the use of olive oil
and red wine.
and red wine again. Red wine phenomenally good for your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Red wine, and again going back to the herbal side of things, you've got invasive plant species in Britain, one of which Japanese knotweed.
Yeah.
Japanese knotweed is very high in a compound called resveratrol, which I know you and I have spoke about before.
Yeah, I
And
take that.
resveratrol also exists within rhubarb and within red wine. So this old adage about red wine's good for your heart, it is, because
Yeah, yeah.
resveratrol actually reduces cholesterol and plaque buildup within the heart.
And just as a caveat, I don't take resveratrol for that specific purpose. I take it in conjunction with another substance that's been knocked back by the FDA, which is NMN, nicotide
Mm,
mononucleotide, which is an NAD precursor, which
yeah.
is all about cell health and
Mm-hmm.
youth. Um, and and
But isn't that in itself? And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but isn't that
yes,
in itself a wonderful thing that we have the ability now? Going back to what I said about the internet being so
100%.
forensic, that we don't have to sit back and just get spoon fed all this information from other people, the higher ups in the echelons of
Yes.
society. We can actually go out and we can find out this research for ourselves. And as long as the people who are supplying those NMN and ashwagandha, et cetera, are providing a good quality product. And I won't mention any names, but there are some real rogues out there when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to these products. You talk about things like mushroom powders, but there are, some absolute rogues out there that are providing these things. So as long as it is a good quality, properly efficacious product, I think it's wonderful that, a couple of beardy fellas like us know about these things.
Yeah, and can find and I think that was my point in regards to COVID. I think now people have even before that it was almost like just to blindly follow along, because there was
Hmm.
never any, even though you had certain the AIDS pandemic and so on and so forth, where there were what after examination and reading RFK Jr.'s book, The Real
Hmm.
Anthony Fauci, discovering how how much of a sort of pharmaceutical mafia took over during the sort of AIDS pandemic in the 80s, and then tried to do it again in COVID, but didn't account for the fact that social media, and this is the point, is they tried to buy all the social media off because they were quite well aware that things were going to find. And then I don't think they accounted for Joe Rogan's influence on the world when they tried to paint him yellow or green or whatever color it was and say that he was taking horse dewormer. And then, you know, when that gets mentioned and I started doing my own research, understanding why certain drugs were demonized and why they weren't demonized and so on and so forth, and then finding out about, somebody in fact told me about MSM, which is another sort of supplement in the same sort of bracket as NMN, which is FDA approved. However, it's not as effective and not as potent as NMN. And it was like through MSM, I found something that basically I was booked in for an MRI. Well, it wasn't an MRI because I've got metal in my knee. I was booked in for a CAT scan because my knees were awful. I'd be sat of an evening in pure, just a constant ache, constant pain, and I'd gotten used to it. And you know, walking downstairs was chaos. It was like Dick Van Dyke out of Mary Poppins, just one man band of cricks and cracks. And then it got to the point where it was that bad, and it was affecting my sleep. It was affecting me being a dad. I couldn't, you know, do things like that I wanted to do with my daughter. I felt decrepit at 30, which is just like, you know, and don't get me wrong, I had a pretty major injury. And I kind of resigned myself to the fact between the age of 30 and 45, I wasn't going to do anything, because at 45, that's when I can potentially get a knee replacement. And I'd booked in for a CAT scan and maybe going for an arthroscopy or whatever it may be. And I thought, you know what? Hail Mary. I did the research. Like you said, 3 a.m., I'm up and I'm reading all about NMN and resveratrol and how one's this and one's that, and this is how it supplements it. And I thought, you know what? Fuck it. I'll give it a go.
Give it a go. What's the worst that could happen?
And I tell you, 3 days after taking it, I got out of bed and I stood up and I sat back down on the bed and I got back up again. There's no pain. Why is there no pain?
My shit doesn't hurt anymore.
Why is it not hurting? And I was like walking down this, just testing, thinking, what's going on? And I haven't looked back. And I've been on NMN now for 2.5 years. And I take my breaks in between and so on and so forth. But I will recommend that anybody that's got any joint problems, I will recommend it because purely on the evidence that it's given me. And then that sort of takes me into the fungi element of you know, through that was my first sort of foray into supplements, because I always thought I was a bit too young for supplements. And then I started researching, you know, what else, and that was when sort of lion's mane comes up, and that's when cordyceps comes up, and then that's when chaga and ashwagandha come up, and then after listening to Graham Hancock, that's when psilocybin came into the mix. And for the last 7 years, I've been going through a really steep therapeutic journey. I've been through trauma, and always been sort of the British stiff upper lip, just get on with it, bury it deep down inside, you can cry when you're dead kind of sort of thing. And never really...
And being a man as well, of course.
100%. And never really understood...
We're designed to not talk about our feelings. And I think it's becoming more acceptable now. I hope to God it's become more acceptable. And I think, is it not the number one cause of death amongst men around 50-odd years old is suicide?
It's between 25 and 45 years old is the higher. White males between 25 and 45 is the highest suicide rate. I think it's absolutely unbelievable. And I was speaking about this with Carl Jones, one of my other guests, because I'm sure he won't mind me saying, because he tried to take his own life after a traumatic brain injury. And I think it's one of those where and I don't think I ever got to the point, and this is what I was explaining with him, is I got low. I was very, very low. And I did have those sorts of thoughts of ending it. But I knew I never was going to. I knew deep down that, yes, I might ruminate on it. But I was never going to go there. But then knowing that people do go there, and knowing as low as I felt, and then realizing, shit, there's a level under this, which gets you to that point. It got to the point where it was like I needed to do something. I needed to move forward in some way, and I started with CBT therapy, which me personally, didn't find very useful, because I'm very much one of those people that if there's a problem, right, I need a solution. I don't want to talk about it. Let's get to a solution. What helps it? And CBT is, even though it does have techniques, it's a lot of talking about the problem, in my experience, without actually manifesting any solution to the problem. So then I started EMDR, which is, I always butcher this, but I'm pretty sure it's eye memory displacement reprogramming, I think.
Yeah, it's quite a new therapy.
Yeah, I'm going to search it because I don't want to. Yeah, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And for those that don't know, it's ultimately, or the way I can explain it, I'm going to Imogen, my old EMDR therapist, is probably going to kill me for this, but you would follow a point, whether it be a finger or a pen or a light, and as you're remembering something traumatic in your life, or some core belief, you would move this quite quickly. So it'd become, and you wouldn't move your head, you'd just follow it with your eyes, and your eyes would become quite uncomfortable because it's almost exercising the muscles within your eyes. And then when you work through it and you decide to reframe that belief. So, for instance, and this didn't happen to me, but for instance, you were hit by your father when you were younger, and your belief from that was that your father didn't love you. And that would be the quick movement. And then from that, you'd reframe that to say, maybe it was your father didn't know how to show his love towards you. And what would happen is you'd slow that movement down for it to become more comfortable for your eyes.
Yeah.
And when you say it out loud like this, it sounds like mumbo jumbo, but holy shit, it works. It works for me. And then that, as soon as that twigged and that worked, and then at the same time of with all the supplements and stuff, I started researching psychedelic therapy. And psychedelic therapy, obviously, it's not something that you could just go and get off the street or go online, unless you're in Ecuador or Peru or somewhere else. And it was one of those things where it twigged on my mind constantly. It was like, I think this will really, really help. It will really, really help me. And it was probably about 18 months. And I had certain, even though I'd worked through certain traumas, I'd got to the point where I used to have a crippling fear of death, like to the point where at 7 or 8 o'clock of an evening, and it wasn't necessarily death itself, it was the fear of getting towards death and not having achieved or done what I wanted to do within this lifetime. So
and being a father is a big part of that as well.
I think that was it, yeah. And I know any parent does. As soon as you become a father or a mother, your world changes literally overnight.
Yeah. And I've just become a grandfather as well.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I keep that for another 20 years at least. Yeah. But yeah, and what used to happen is I'd have like 2 or 3 sleepless nights, to the point where it then impacts on relationships. It then impacts on your ability to function as a member of society, or as a person, and or as a dad. And that a mix with other elements pushed me to the point where it's like, right, I'll try it once. I'll do it once. And I did. And it was it was the most I've done quite a lot in my life. I've lived in different countries, and I've been on walking safaris in Botswana, and amazing experiences that people pay a hell of a lot of money for, and I feel so lucky to have done. But this was by far, hands down, the most real, amazing experience of my whole entire life that has shaped me to be the person that's sat talking to you right now.
Yeah.
And the fact that that is not readily available to people pisses me off to high heaven every day.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that, I mean, well, first of all, I want to caveat a few things. First of all is thank you for talking about your story. I think that it's very important.
That.
It's very important to normalize that conversation, I think, where, as we said, it's still in its infancy of men being kind of allowed is the wrong word, but encouraged to talk about the fact that
Comfortable. I think
they've been down.
comfortable.
So
yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And I think that's important that, the more people normalize that conversation, the better. Moving on with psychedelics, again, just a couple of caveats. I mean, I have to say, I've never done magic mushrooms. I'm not saying I won't, but I've not been in a place in my life yet where I felt the need to. And again, I'm not going to demonize anyone that has. So that's the kind of first thing. But to the point of, it should be more readily available. The problem again is the amount of research, and the research is actually very conflicting. So very little research has been done into the long-term effects of psilocybin. The only real research that's been done is in a therapeutic setting, and it is to do with people who are having major trauma or life-changing events. So something like people who have inoperable cancers and a fear of death and anxiety around death, where the psilocin or psilocybin is given in a very measured dose, and it's actually very high dose. And rather than being a series of small doses to keep them on a level of being, happy, as it were, not, tripping the tits off, but, in a very kind of like even non-anxious state. That hasn't been the case. The vast majority of research has been done, and there's an awful lot being done in America. Cathcart did some, Ross did another one. Johns Hopkins University.
John Hopkins, I've read that. That was the one with the terminal ill patients.
Yeah, so what they did was they actually gave them in therapeutic conditions in a very specific setting, because the setting is very important.
Everything.
It's all about setting, and you should never do magic mushrooms or any psychedelic or any delirium if you're in a bad place mentally, physically, if you're not, if you're angry, if you're hyper emotional.
One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got, and it kind of goes for anything that's almost sort of psychoactive, whether that be alcohol or for those that do, cocaine's a psychoactive chemical and whatnot, is you should never take something or ingest something that's psychoactive to feel better. You should always do it to feel even better.
Yes, correct.
Which is the best piece of advice that I could ever give anybody regarding that.
Yeah, so all of the research is basically being about a very short-term high dose. It is very hard to quantify getting back to magic mushrooms on a daily basis, as you're saying, for humans to make them feel better. It's very hard to quantify the results from that, because it's not being done in a therapeutic environment. Most people who've had it in a therapeutic, in a therapeutic environment have also had adjuvant therapy, talking therapy, as they've undergone that process. And it's been done under very clinical conditions. The problem from a pulling together all of the science to make it work so that it helps more people, as you said, is that it's almost impossible. So people who've taken magic mushrooms, psilocybin, psilocin, whatever it may be, liberty caps, all different types of mushrooms on a street level, for want of a better phrase,
Hmm.
in home settings, is that what's the setting been? Have they had
Yes.
alcohol as well? What else have they ingested? What other foods have they had? Have they had fatty foods? Have they had sugary foods? I don't think I mentioned, have they had alcohol? Have they had any kind of talking therapy? How much have they had? Body size. There's so many different nuanced factors that it's almost impossible to pull together any amount of discernible information to try and put together one size fits all dosage.
100. And to add to that list that you mentioned as well is the way that they're administered as well. It
Yeah.
makes a huge
Mm-hmm.
difference. I know from my own personal experience the nausea that comes sometimes from the way that you take them
Mm-hmm.
is it's well after your trip it's quite traumatizing in the
Mm-hmm.
bathroom, put it one way, that obviously your body doesn't want this substance in it.
If there's a
um
sound clip you're ever going to use, traumatizing in the bathroom
oh yeah,
is
it
probably
is.
going to be the one.
It will be there, but anybody that's experienced it knows exactly what I'm talking about. And yeah, and I think that sort of element and frustration must, especially for somebody like yourself who does the research
Mm-hmm.
and and works within the industry, and for a scientific fact, this is not sort of like airy fairy nonsense. It's not sort of, and don't get me wrong, I do believe in the ether, and I believe in force. Somebody said it the other day, and it was a perfect analogy. Is the fact that people believe in this Wi-Fi 5G signal that nobody
Mm-hmm.
can fucking see, but yet everybody believes it exists. But then when you mention something about the ether and mumbo jumbo, as people, oh no, you can't see it, it doesn't exist, and
Mm-hmm.
it's quite funny when you liken it that way. But this stuff that is science backed by fact,
Mm-hmm.
um, it must be so frustrating from your perspective, from somebody who knows that there seems to be. It's almost like you're driving down a highway trying to find an off ramp, and every single time there's a locked gate in your way, locked gate, locked gate, locked gate, because the government or whoever it may be, whether it be government, big pharma, or whatever, no, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
No, you can't do that. And when on the other side of that gate is Eden, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a very difficult and highly nuanced subject to talk about, and I think in the same way that smoking weed in the 70s, you were
Mm.
just smoking weed.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it is.
Nowadays, it's smoking crack.
But even yeah, but even even with weed, back in the 70s, people used to smoke it, and then nowadays it's crossbred and cross pollinated, and
Yes,
strains are developed, etc., etc. And the same thing exists within the magic mushroom field. So
100%.
a lot of the magic mushrooms now, the Psilocybe cubensis family is massive. And
Mm.
some of the crossbreeds that are out there, and they've got some ridiculous names. I mean, you probably know some of them. There's Golden Teacher, Mazatapek, Penis Envy makes me laugh
Penis,
every
yeah,
time.
penis envy is the one that I thought about as soon as you mentioned that. Then penis
Yeah,
envy
but
was the one.
I'm not sure
I'm not
where you.
envious.
No, no. I mean,
Definitely not.
yeah, I'm not sure where your brain would be at if you were tripping balls and then talked about penis envy. I think it'd be probably another conversation. But
Yeah.
again, the issue is that, you know, when you're looking at therapeutic uses, and I absolutely hand on heart, even for somebody that's never had magic mushrooms ever, I absolutely believe hand on heart that they can be used in a very therapeutic way. The science says it can be used in a very therapeutic way. The problem, of course, is that when you are having all of these crossbreeds and cross pollinizations and variants within a natural thing, all of a sudden it becomes much harder to quantify the use of those mushrooms.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I think that sort of on a side, it brings in what's sort of happened relatively recently in the States, even though I think it is, cannabis is still illegal at a federal level, but at a state level, it's legal in a lot of them.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
most of America, you can have a medical marijuana license.
yeah,
I think if you go to LA and you stub your toe on the coffee table, they'll give you a medical marijuana license. Apparently,
which
so
which in essence, and this has always been my sort of thought process on it, is regulation of narcotics or anything along those lines ultimately does one of two things.
it's hugely detrimental. Hugely.
Yeah, and the fact that nothing. Well, I saw it in the 90s growing up. When I was going out in the 90s as a teenager, and you're in the clubs, pills was a massive thing.
Hmm.
And you got like Happy Mondays and Bez. Anybody in a in a club setting, you could go in and you could see somebody chewing the face off in the corner on a pill, and but the unregulated sort of production of those pills
Hmm.
meant people died because they
Yeah.
didn't actually know what were in
Hmm.
that one tiny pill, and it was just an anomaly,
Yeah.
which ultimately demonized MDMA for 20, 30 years.
Hmm.
And then vice versa with these mushrooms and stuff. What sort of seems to be happening is because people that are in power don't know, well, it's bad, it's dangerous,
Hmm.
don't do it. When in fact, if they actually did what you did, when your wife was going through the perimenopause, is research,
Hmm.
learn,
Yeah.
find out, and ultimately at the end of that, and this is, it doesn't have to be made legal or anything to the public, but it should, like Paul Stamets has been an absolute trailblazer for it. It
Hmm.
should be made legal for scientific research.
100%, 100%. And this is half the problem, is that the people who want to do the research, especially within the UK, is that the organizations that want to do the research into one particular type of psilocin from one particular type of mushroom that hasn't been genetically engineered and is a standard, if you like, a base level mushroom,
Yeah.
that want to do that research are just blocked at every single turn because there is so much fear around the fact that the second you do that, the floodgates are opened and they're so scared that we're just going to be a nation of. And I don't know whether it's the government is scared of whether we're going to be a nation of stoners chasing dragons around the hills, or more dangerously, we are going to become a nation of people who have become so much more self aware,
Mm.
which is what the belief is with people who have taken psilocybin from either whether it be a personal journey, whether it be through a clinical research. But they talk about, the death of ego.
Yeah.
And
Well,
all of a
ego
sudden,
death is the big thing.
it's a huge thing.
I've
Yeah.
seen
And
it all over with people that have these retreats in Bali and the
mhm,
retreats in Holland. It is all advertised as
yeah.
ego death. Now,
And all of a sudden, and I think one of the greatest tricks the devil ever played on us is to say that, you're the important one. What you want
yeah,
is what's most important,
mm,
and it's a lie. I think that
100%.
we've lost that ability to go, okay, whilst I am important, I am part of a community,
Mm,
whether it be your local community, whether it be the community of humans, the world, whatever it may be. But I think that we've lost somewhere along the line that ability to go, I want to do. And there are a few wonderful trailblazers out there that are doing things for the benefit of the greater good, that they're doing things for the benefit of their community. And I think once you use a medicine, in this case, psilocybin, whatever it may be, that gets rid of your idea of self, your notion of your own ego, your own importance, and you then start looking out into the bigger, wider world, going, "What can I do? What can I do as an individual to
mm,
help my community to become a better thing?" And you wonder whether the government, and again, I'm not, you know me, I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing
No.
conspiracy theorist at all, but you do wonder whether somebody somewhere says, we don't want people to start looking at what is good for the rest of the world. We want people to be worried about themselves. We want people to be thinking of themselves and themselves only. Because when you're alone in your thoughts and in your deeds, you become more fearful. You haven't got a support network around you. So you then live your life partially in fear. What happens if I lose my job? Am I going to lose my partner? Am I going to lose access to my kids, my mortgage, my house, my car, my holidays, etc.? So all of those fears come into play. Whereas if you have the support of a bigger, wider community network, all of a sudden those personal fears vanish.
Yeah.
And when fear vanishes, control vanishes.
Yeah, and I think you've probably hit the nail on the head in terms of that, and especially with what's sort of transpired over the last few weeks with what the government are trying to do with digital ID. And I spoke with Tom
Fuck off.
Tom
Seriously.
Pickup. It's it's that, and it's almost like a a window into, or your sort of area of expertise is a microcosm for what's happening on a wider scale, in terms of the fact that, while just imagine, obviously, because when I came, I saw you were over your, was it the laminar flow hood, and you're sort
Yeah.
of dealing with your tinctures and this, that, the other, and it's almost like the government standing behind you, reaching over your shoulder. No, you can't do that one.
Yeah.
Moving things away from you.
Yeah.
And it's almost, you do feel, in a metaphorical sense, it's like turning around and going, like you just said, fuck off, leave me alone.
Hmm.
And it it's at what point, and I do understand, in a sense, governmental overreach, when it's at, and I spoke about this with Tom, when it's at detriment to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
then 100% the government needs to come in, and it might not be the detriment, it might be the betterment, even. But if you're affecting somebody else's life without their consent or knowledge, then it needs to be stopped.
Yeah.
However, what it seems to me, especially in your world, is the fact that there is evidence, there is science, especially when you look at the turkey tail and cordyceps,
Mm-hmm.
and the research that's done on psilocin and psilocybin, and well, all of them, chaga, ashwagandha, every single one. And there's little. I mean, if you take psilocybin and psilocin out of it, because there can be negative effects with them psychologically. With the others, there's little to no negative effects at all.
No, and quite the opposite. That's the thing, is that you take all of the, and fuck it, I'm going to call them.
Do it.
I'm going to call them medicinal tinctures, and if the MHRA want to come and see me, they can find me at Holden Clough
Oh
in
well,
Lancashire. Fuck them.
it's all on me.
Yeah.
It's my podcast. Bring it on.
So I am going to refer to them as medicinal things, but I think you're quite right, and it's actually the opposite is true. That often when people take mushrooms for a medicinal reason, often the ones that they're taking and the way that they've been manufactured or sourced is actually deleterious, because they will do you no good whatsoever. You just have very expensive urine because they've not done it properly. They've literally jumped on a bandwagon which is estimated to be in the billions of pounds worldwide. They
I
know
think
nothing about what they're doing.
I think the last count was something like 8 billion pound industry
Yeah,
in terms of mushroom supplements alone.
yeah, and
Takes any
it's
other
rising.
supplement, yeah,
Yeah,
and it and
yeah,
and the thing is, especially in America and stuff, where there is that sort of progressive thinking, if you add psilocybin and psilocin to that mix, then it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
yeah. And then you add in, of course, using mushrooms as a very viable food source, and I
Well,
would.
yeah, but beefsteak. I found my first beefsteak the other week. It
Good
was,
man,
it was. I
good
know,
man.
it was unbelievable. I've been
It's a
searching for
moment
years. It
in any
is,
young man's life.
but it's such a strange. you know, like you see your mushrooms, like your
Honey fungus.
honey fungus. You
Yeah.
see them very regularly, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just not that they're boring because they are beautiful, but they are ten a penny. They're
Yeah.
everywhere. But when you find that rare one
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't ever seen in my life, it is almost like that gleeful jump for joy moment.
I remember, I don't know if I told you this story. I remember years ago going out doing some bioprospecting, which is where you go out specifically looking for certain types of mushrooms to then do some research on. And I remember just corner of my eye seeing this bright purple thing
Oh,
in the woods. And I was like, fuck, oh my God. And I went through, and being a bold guy, you crawl
scratches
through,
everywhere.
crawling through the hedgerow, and there's cuts on my head, and I'm getting poked in the eye with sticks, and I'm kneeling on stinging nettles and God knows what else. And I crawl as fast as I can, and I get to this wonderful purple thing, which turns out to be a quality street wrapper. Fucking hell. But yes, I mean, kind of going back to the point about the use and efficacy
Yeah.
of mushrooms is that an awful lot of companies now, and I contacted, as part of the research I did initially, I contacted 10 of the UK's largest suppliers of mushroom products, mushroom tinctures, mushroom powders, to find out, how they grow them. Not because I wanted to rip them off, not because I wanted to copy what they were doing, but it was part of my learning, my research
Yeah.
that I was, kind of balls deep into at that point.
Yeah.
And it turned out that of the 10 companies that I contacted, 9 of them didn't grow their mushrooms. They actually imported
Wow.
them all as a brown amorphous powder from China, because it became a commercial decision that it was much easier to import mushrooms that have been grown, dehydrated, made inert, because obviously the Environment Agency don't want fungus coming into the country that could then escape. They've got a huge problem in the States at the moment with invasive species of golden oyster,
Right.
hugely invasive species now in America. And I know actually of one company in Britain that is now refusing to sell, or is withdrawn from sale, liquid culture, which is the sort of the mycelium, if you like, the root
Yeah.
structure of mushrooms, of golden oyster, because they're worried that the same thing will happen in
Wow.
Britain. But yeah, out of these 10 companies, 9 of them didn't grow their own mushrooms. They literally imported them as a brown amorphous ground up powder from China, and then popped them into a capsule or threw them into a coffee and then sold them.
Hmm.
And in terms of efficacy, in terms of, will it work? No, it won't,
No.
because
Well, the coffee thing has always baffled me because I mean I've seen the mushroom coffees and I've gone caffeine free. And now I just have decaf coffee. But in fact, I'll give a shout out to Vanavasa Coffee, which is one of the podcast sponsors that do an amazing decaf coffee. So shout out to them.
big up.
They the whole I looked at it and thought, oh well, this could be an avenue for me now that I'm caffeine free, and so on and so forth. I could have a look. Turns out some of them had caffeine in anyway. But then I started thinking, in terms of what you do with a coffee, which is pour boiling water on it, I know what that does to mushrooms in terms of boiling, and the thing with preparing psilocybin to ingest is the fact that you don't pour directly onto the mushroom, because what you do is you have a very, very good chance of taking out every bit of nutrient that you want from that mushroom, because of the heat, and it just never. I ended up never getting any
I mean,
of this stuff.
yeah, I mean, it comes down to actually the biology of mushrooms. So your building blocks are, skin, bone, muscle tissue, blood, etc. The building block of a mushroom is a compound called chitin. It's actually
Right.
written chitin, chitin, but it's actually pronounced chitin, and it is the same compound that lobster's exoskeleton is made out of, beetles are
All
made
right.
of.
Yeah.
So the body physically can't break it down. It's impossible for the body to break it down. And if it does, it is in a minute way. So just taking a powder that will pass through your system fairly quickly, it doesn't give the body long enough to break it down, if it could do it at all, to actually be able to extract those compounds that are good. So you have water soluble compounds, and this is where dual extraction tinctures come in. And it sounds like a sales pitch for me. It's not,
No, no, no.
buy what you want from wherever you want, but the facts are the facts, and you can't get away from that. So there are two major groups of compounds within mushrooms that are beneficial. Again, I'm going to say, from a medical point of view. And you have water soluble compounds, so things like PSKs, beta glucans, polysaccharides, and they are locked within the cell wall of that chitin. And you can only extract those by the use of hot water. And
Right.
Traditionally, you would have to simmer them for kind of 8 to 12 hours. Now, again,
Wow.
unless you've got simmering coffee in your gut for 8 to 12 hours,
You ain't getting it.
you're not getting it. The other side of it is compounds that are only alcohol soluble, and there is some new research coming out about using hypersonics agitation to withdraw those compounds, to break down the cell wall, the chitin in the cell wall. But they are traditionally only soluble within an alcohol solvent. So you would have to, again, soak those mushrooms within alcohol. Traditionally, it would be done like in a kilner jar. And this is how I first started out, is you would put the mushrooms in a kilner jar, dehydrated, because you have to start with a dehydrated mushroom. Otherwise, the amount of water that's in the mushroom can deleteriously affect, it's phenomenal, can deleteriously affect your end result. And if you were to dry a mushroom, if you dried a kilo of fresh mushroom, you'd end up with about 100 grams.
100 grams,
dry.
Yeah. It's
a
tenfold. Yeah.
Drop down. And then you've used the alcohol then to as a solvent to extract things like triterpenes and terpenes and a few other bits and bobs. And it's at that point you've then done you do your alcohol extraction first, and then your water extraction, and then you bring them together, and that becomes this dual extracted tincture that the University of Queensland said was 7 times more effective than a powder. Minimum 7 times more effective than a powder. And the analogy I always use is that paracetamol is a wonderful drug. It's a fantastic drug when used in the right way. Paracetamol is a great drug. However, if you don't take it out of the plastic packet before you swallow it, it's going to do you absolutely no good whatsoever. So the same theory holds with the mushroom, is unless you unpack it, unless you unpack those medicinal compounds, the important things out of that mushroom, it's going to...
This episode is brought to you by Vanavasa Coffee. Since going caffeine-free, I've realised how hard it is to find a genuinely good decaf coffee. Most of them taste flat, weak, or like they're just there to tick a box for the few of us that don't want or need that caffeine hit. But I still love coffee. The morning ritual, the warmth, the silence that comes with that first sip. And that's how I came across Vanavasa Coffee. A brand inspired by the wilderness, built around presence, purpose and balance. Their coffees are grown all over the world and roasted right here in the UK. Each blend tells a story. I've partnered with Vanavasa Coffee because it's about more than caffeine. It's about connection and the ritual. Right now, they're inviting a small group to join before they launch. You can register your interest and get 15% off your first order by visiting cutthes.com/sponsors and clicking on Vanavasa Coffee. That's cutthes.com/sponsors and clicking on Vanavasa Coffee.
Do you no good, and you will just essentially end up with very expensive urine. Simple.
I remember, the first time we met, which was almost like a holistic well-being event, and I remember listening to your, I can't even remember how long it was, 10-15 minute sort of presentation on it. And before that, we were talking, and you mentioned about the alcohol, which was annoying for me because obviously I'm alcohol free. But ultimately, there is different ways to do it, and at the minute, I don't necessarily feel the need to supplement anything that
There are alternative ways. So there is a machine called a Rotovap, which once you've done the alcohol extraction, you then put that liquid slurry into this machine called a rotovap, which then basically heats it and evaporates the alcohol out in a very controlled way. But those machines are like $5,000 a piece. And I'm
Yeah.
a small town, small guy with a small setup trying to, make it work and help people out. I can't afford,
No.
unless of course there is a company out there that would like to sponsor me for a rotovap.
Well, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Honestly, it'd be well worth the investment
Yeah.
from my perspective, and I think that sort of element from a public perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
understanding, it's the same sort of thought process as what I was speaking in regards to Tom and politics on, is the fact that a lot of the stuff that people get pissed off at and frustrated at, and in your field of work, it's mumbo jumbo bollocks, is because it's the lack of. They're not going to go out and research like I do and like you
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
because it takes a certain kind of person, and generally that certain person is already on the supplements that they want because they've done the research and done the digging and whatnot. And especially within sort of this boom of mushroom supplements and mushroom coffees and mushroom powders, and I mean, I know I've sort of donned the mushroom t-shirt and the mushroom
It didn't
clothes
go
for.
unnoticed, brother. It didn't go
Oh,
unnoticed.
I'll show you the back. The back's even better. The back's got all of them on.
Oh, there you go. Look at that.
Yeah,
Perfect.
so in your honor.
Thank you.
But like I said, this is a sort of, I found this. I think I might have bought it from TK Maxx. Is the fact that it's kind of become a business in itself. It's cool. It's cool to like mushrooms. And generally, the Amanita muscaria is the one that is the brand in front of every sort of thing
it's
in
kind
terms
of like
of mushrooms.
how was it French bulldogs were on every cushion imaginable 3-4 years ago. Everything, you couldn't look at anything without a picture of a French bulldog or a pug being on something.
You walk through the range and it's literally statue of a French bulldog here, and pillow of a French bulldog there, and coming from somebody that has an actual English bulldog, it was quite frustrating. Because mine doesn't have pointy ears.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things with that these conversations, in my opinion, need to happen, because that, from somebody that did know about mushrooms and the benefits of mushrooms, when I first spoke to you and you were mentioning about the alcohol and why you use, in essence, like an ethanol based thing to draw out the shittings and the break it down and this, that. When you explained it like that, it made sense, and I understood a hell of a lot more. But I wouldn't have gone looking for that.
And I think that's part of what I like to do. I educated myself, and I don't want to come across as being big-headed, but I think that part of when you become obsessed with a subject, you like to share that knowledge. You like to share that subject matter with other people, and it does become almost obsessive, and you do like to talk about it. And I have always been one that's very much a kind of, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And it's very black and white. And I've always looked at things that way. And you're right. It's become a very kind of corporate thing. Mushrooms are on everything, cushions, God knows what else. I'm going to make a prediction that a lot of Christmas decorations that come out this year have got a lot of Amanita within them. And Amanita is an interesting mushroom to talk about. So if you want, we can talk about that in a sec.
So they should be on Christmas decorations, in my opinion.
So they should, yeah, for all sorts of historically accurate reasons.
Yeah.
But I think part of what I like to do is to educate people so that they can then go make an informed decision. It's as simple as that. And the problem with a lot of the, coming back to the very purpose of this podcast, is to cut through the shit, where you will find, and I won't mention him because I don't want either of us being sued, but there are companies out there making...
I've got nothing, so he can sue me all he wants. He can take this microphone, but I'll still shout.
So you've got companies out there making Absolutely outrageous claims. There is one company that says that if you take their mushroom supplement, you can grow a full beard in 2 weeks.
I've seen
I
these.
don't know about
Yeah.
you, but it takes, I don't know about your rig, but mine took more than 2 weeks to grow, for
This
sure.
is approximately 7-8 years.
Yeah. I've seen another one that said that if you take their mushroom supplement, and they've got a side by side picture of a guy that's quite weighty, not obese, but
Mm.
weighty. And then next to him, and they both look like kind of CGI, to be honest with you, is a guy with a rippling six pack. And they said that, if you take our mushroom supplement, our mushroom tincture, whatever you want to call it, you'll get rid of all the cortisol stress hormone that's within your body and you will look like this. And it's like, absolutely not. But what they do, and it's very clever the way they do it, and this has been the very trick of advertising forever,
Mm.
is they will say, and look at it in terms of the mushrooms. This mushroom will do this. So
Mm.
buy our product. Okay, that mushroom will do that, but your product isn't necessarily the route to entry to get to that point.
Yes.
And
So,
therein lies the problem. Unless it's unpacked properly, you will
mm,
never get to that point. And that's
yeah.
where they use the smoke and mirrors and the bullshit of Instagram and Facebook and everything else. And they'll get, famous celebrities to go, oh, I've been taking this and I feel great. And I saw one advert for Lion's Mane and it made me piss myself laughing. And it said, I've been taking your lion's mane powder since Tuesday and I feel fucking fantastic and I feel so much more alert, blah, blah. So, as we've said, the way lion's mane works is the erinacines, the compound within there that you have to unpack properly,
Hmm.
go into the brain derived neurotropic factor. They will then rebuild the neurons and the dendrites, etc., etc. And there's new evidence to suggest it's wonderful. People with ADHD, traumatic brain injury, stroke victims, early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, etc., etc. That will not fucking happen from Tuesday. It just
No.
won't. I'm sorry to break it to you,
Well, no,
but it
and
takes a bit of a while to build neural pathways in the brain.
I think, yeah, and I mean, Carl, he obviously traumatic brain injury, stroke survivor.
Mm-hmm.
He swears by lion's mane,
Yeah.
takes it regularly, and I think the thing is, and you've seen it recently with Ozempic.
Mm-hmm.
This marvelous weight loss injection, and people, South Park do a really funny episode on it,
I,
which is
I,
fucking
I,
brilliant.
I think Ozempic's kind of notable in that people refused to take the COVID jab because they didn't know what was in it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
yet,
and then people are just, this is the point in terms of education, is the fact that Ozempic is peptides. That's
mhm.
a layman's
Yeah,
terms. What's in it is
it's a
peptides.
GLP-1 neuroagonist. Yeah, so
Now, you and I both know, as people that go down rabbit holes and search
mhm.
and learn the scientific, peptides are awesome things. They are amazing. They can do so
I think
much.
watch this space. I think within the next 5 years, peptides will become almost a household phrase where
Yeah,
we will be talking about them incessantly. And the reason that things like Ozempic and Wegovy and other weight loss medications are available is because it is what's called a GLP-1, a
yeah.
glucagon-like peptide 1. And basically, these peptides make you feel fuller for longer so you don't eat as much.
And and I agree with you, but I think the danger is, and this is where it sort of, in my opinion, transfers onto other industries like fungi
Mm-hmm.
supplements, is the fact that even though peptides are amazing and they can do, there's people that used to be 19 stone that are now 10
Mm-hmm.
stone, and
For
they've
some people, it's
it's
been fantastic, a wonderful thing.
and such a quick turnaround. But they are also so dangerous taken in the wrong doses, to the point where
Yeah.
my concern, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer of, if you're overweight, move more, eat less, and it will work
Which is
100% of the time.
okay unless you've got a disability that
Of
prohibits
course.
you from moving more, a back injury, whatever it may be.
But for instance, say, for 75% of the population, it's just get up, move more, eat less. You will lose weight. It's a scientific fact. It's been that way for the dawn of time. Just do as such. But doing this through peptides. What obviously it makes you feel fuller for longer, therefore you don't ingest as much, therefore you lose weight. But what's happening, and especially my concern is with society's sort of stigma about women and women need to be thin and this, that, the other, and so on and so forth, which is a load of bollocks in itself, is the fact that they also have a propensity to develop something called osteoporosis.
Mm-hmm.
And with the lack of nutrients at say between 20 to 40 years old, that I'm very, very concerned that in 20, 30 years time, this sort of quick fix drug, which is in essence an amazing thing, used correctly, being used incorrectly, therefore going to cause this absolute pandemic later down the line.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this transfers into the fungi world, of the fact that you've just hit the nail on the head, where you've got a fat guy on the right and a thin guy on the left with a six-pack, and this mushroom does this, and then when they don't get that result, well, that's a load of bullshit. It doesn't work. Well, in fact, no, it will work, but what you're
Done in the right
taking is
way.
it's an inferior product. It's not right, and it's going to end up it's going to end up causing that sort of disbelief within.
Yeah, and like most things, I mean, the Manjaro, Ozempic, etc. And I think for me, they do fall into the same category as vaping pens.
Yeah.
And I think that if they were designed and used correctly as a bridge, so you go from being a smoker to a non-smoker and then stop vaping. If you go from being overweight to being of a healthy weight, that you can, if you have a disability or you're so overweight that it becomes painful to move for whatever reason, and you become of a more healthy weight that allows you to do more exercise,
Yes.
then stop, because you've learned how to eat properly, you've learned good nutrition, you've started to manage your portion sizes, you are physically able to move now. And again, you use that as a bridge to get to another place, and then stop because your lifestyle is now different. Absolutely perfect.
Yes.
I see nothing wrong with those at all. My issue with it is, and it's the same with vaping, is that it's almost the tail wagging the dog. And there are people who have never smoked in their life that are vaping. And as
Yeah,
you said,
that's a very northern term, that Aid. I like that one.
for a guy that's not even a northern lad, I think
I know
that was all right.
that's a great one.
But I think you're
I
right.
agree.
I think, yeah.
And I think the thing is with the sort of tail wagging the dog. I can't get over that. It's a granddad. The sort of the danger, and it almost then becomes a hindrance to actual true research
Yes.
and true results. And what will often get laughed off then as mumbo jumbo, it actually isn't mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And that sort of supplement, it's in the name, supplement. It's not a cure. It's not
Yeah. It's
a
not a
one.
panacea, is it?
No, and with the psilocybin and uleucine in the research is your body does not want this. It's not addictive in the slightest.
Yeah.
I've got many friends and many acquaintances. You have to trick your body into ingesting this substance because your body wants to reject it every single time.
Yeah.
And it's one of those for me where you've got people addicted to sugar, caffeine, alcohol. I mean, I hate cocaine, which is right. You go into a bar. I mean, for the first time in about 4 years, I went into a pub the other night because it was one of my friend's birthdays, and it was so surreal because I haven't been in a pub setting for a long, long time. Just to drink. Like, I've been for meals and stuff, but just around a pool table where everybody's got a beer, it was quite almost like a Twilight moment. But you go into the toilets in a pub like that, and it's like a cacophony of sniffs left, right, and centre because it's just like weed was in the 70s. Probably it's what cocaine is now. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, understand. And I was speaking to Nico about this because he deals with a lot of cocaine addiction. Is the fact that understanding the science behind them elements and cocaine and alcohol and why you should never ever mix the two, because as soon as them two elements you ingest them together, they're no longer cocaine and alcohol. There's something called cocethylene, which is one of the strongest strongest depressants known
Yeah.
to man.
Yeah.
Then it all kind of makes sense. And when you've got these substances that are so addictive, that are harmful, in my opinion, you know, I won't demonize anybody for having a social drink and having fun, but generally it has a lot to answer for, does alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're quite right. I don't think in all the research I've done, I've never known anybody that's done magic mushrooms and driven a car and killed somebody drink driving,
No. Well,
because you don't want to.
you don't want to move.
You know, you just want to sit there and eat M&Ms and just chill the fuck out, you know. Same thing
Yeah.
with, and then it brings you on to other natural highs. So things like DMT, dimethyltryptamine,
Well,
which,
yeah, there's.
again, a wholly natural product.
Well,
which
we are sat here now
all
creating
mammals create
DMT.
DMT. All mammals create DMT, and there's a theory that when people die or have near-death experiences and they see the light and they see all the colors and the amazing things and angels, that is our brain trying to make sense of this huge DMT, dimethyltryptamine dump happening into our brain. DMT, again, perfectly natural substance, comes from the root bark of a plant called Mimosa hostilis. Actually, phenomenally easy to make as well. And again, it's no, and it's kind of it's in and out of your system. I think that as opposed to psilocybin trips, which could be 2, 4, 5 hours
Yeah.
potentially, DMT is a 6 to 8 minute trip. Now, I'm not going to sit here and glorify it. I don't want all the teenagers listening to this to run out and try and get hold of DMT. I'm not going to do that. That's not what this podcast is about. Both you
And
I
it's
believe
likely not DMT, so don't do that.
and that's where I was coming to, is the fact that actually when you run out and you hear somebody says, and this comes back to your point quite neatly, which is this thing's really good, so people run out and get it. But actually you're not getting that product. You're getting some adulterated, piss poorly extracted cacophony of other bullshit, or just dry powders or something, which will do you no fucking good whatsoever, or conversely will do you lots of bad.
Yes.
And I think that's what I found within my research within the fungal world, is that unless you do things properly, you could be putting yourself at harm or at risk, or conversely, like you alluded to, you will take a product and go, well, this is shit. I've been taking lion's mane tablets for weeks. And I've had people come to see me at my grow facility at Holden Clough and go, it's a bit fucking nonsense, this, isn't it? I went, what do you mean? Wow, this mushroom bit, I've been taking lion's mane for weeks now and it's piss all good. And I was like, and my very first question is, how? How have you been taking it? In what format have you been taking it? Oh, I've got these capsules off this company called blah, blah, blah. And then I go, oh, because I know that I'm about to walk into a 10-minute hold my beer speech all about how it's just bullshit.
Yeah. And that, I think maybe the sort of taboo that there's been around fungi and around the sort of, I mean, I get it now, you know, in terms of the homeopathic sphere. You know, it's almost held in the same reverence as fucking fortune tellers and, you know, crystal ball on the pleasure beach sort of kind of thing. And in reality, it's older than anything that you've seen. It's like you mentioned in terms of the Roman and Christian Empire sort of taking over. You know, paganism goes way older than Christianity, older than the Roman
and
Empire.
It predates that. So there's a theory by a really interesting fellow called Terence McKenna.
Legend of
a man, famous psychonaut who did a ton of mushrooms in his day, And he postulated this theory called the stoned ape theory. Yep. And the theory was that, and I think I can't remember if I sent you across a graphic. So there's this theory that says that, and scientists have gone, no, it's bullshit. It's absolute nonsense. Oh, thank you for putting that up. So scientists have gone, no, it's bullshit. It can't be true. But don't forget, science is right until it's not,
Until it's wrong. And that's
until it's wrong.
happening quite a lot recently.
A lot. And again, this comes back to citizen science where people are going, you bullshit, it's wrong. So for those that can see the list on the screen now, this is a graphic that basically shows the size of the human cranium over, kind of the development of humankind rather than mankind or
Right.
humankind.
Well, it'd have to go back a lot further now,
Yes,
considering
of
the recent
course.
discovery. However,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that was where it was thought that we separated from apes, and
Yeah.
this is
So there's this
our
very,
trajectory.
kind of controversial theory called the stoned ape theory, which is where, as you can see on the screen, there's a very steady, gradual incline, uphill, uphill, uphill. So our cranium, so because we're getting cleverer, we're developing, we're evolving, our brain's getting bigger. So conversely, our cranium has to get bigger as well to compensate for being a bigger brain. And then all of a sudden, around the time of Homo habilis, which were the great hunter-gatherers,
And they were in and around South
Africa,
Africa
yeah,
based. Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, so hunter-gatherers, when you hunt an animal, you look for two things. And this goes back to my bushcraft survival kind of
Here we go.
teaching days, is you look for its tracks and you look for its poo, where it's poo, it's been. It's quite simple. And there was this theory, this stoned ape theory, is that when these Homo habilis were tracking animals to hunt them, they found the dung of the animals. And within those piles of dung were a specific type of psychoactive mushroom called Psilocybin cubensis, which was growing out of the dung because Psilocybin cubensis are dung lovers. And all of a sudden, we were like, well, Jesus, I haven't got any gazelle for tea, so
Have one of those.
let's have a mushroom instead. And they were eating these mushrooms, and all of a sudden, this expansion of consciousness, because it allows you to walk away from the 2D of the here and now into this 5, 6, 7, 8D world and
Well,
universes that are out there.
coming from personal experience, and it's when people have asked me, I've got teammates on my hockey team and stuff that have asked me and whatnot, and it's always a very, very difficult thing to try and convey and explain what a mushroom trip is like when somebody hasn't experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I probably put people off the way I explain it, to be honest. But the only thing I can liken it to is most adults in and around my age have gone under some form of general anesthetic in their lifetime.
Yeah.
And that feeling of when the coldness comes up the arm for the injection and it's almost all rushes to the head and then you're out.
Yeah.
It's like that feeling, but you don't go out and then wake up wondering what happened. You go out, you leave your body, you go to some other dimension or some other place completely, and your body stays precisely where it is very much an out-of-body experience. And where everything, and this is the other thing relating to what you mentioned when you said about connection and understanding that we're all in this together and we do this for one another. You see it's almost like that scene from Rain Man where everything just makes sense and you it's like, now I get it. Now I understand it, but you can't explain it.
Yeah. And so there was this theory that all of a sudden we had this huge awakening of consciousness, of invention. Invention's a great example. If you think about how much critical thinking there is involved in inventing a bow and arrow, the very simplest of hunting weapons, how much critical thinking, I won't go into the kind of breaking it all down, but how much critical thinking there is involved in creating a bow and arrow. That takes a quantum leap in the understanding of materials, of science, of how things work, of aeronautics, trajectory science, you name it. So, I see no reason to doubt why scientists are poo-pooing this idea. The interesting thing about that graph, though, is that people who are watching this on the video, if you look at the very end of the graph where it says
we're going down,
where it says modern humans, we're actually on our way down. Our cranium size is actually starting to reduce. Now, why that is anyone's guess. I've got a theory on it, and I don't think it's got any. I think AI is too new a thing. I think that
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you're talking thousands of years here, certainly hundreds of years, but more likely thousands of years. And my theory is, and it also follows on from some research that was done by a company called BME Medical or BME International, sorry, that said that we are no longer our development is no longer environmentally based. So
Right. Okay.
we would develop as humans. We got cleverer. Our eyesight got better because if we poked our head out of a cave, something ate us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we had to develop other ways to evolve, and our eyesight became better, and our ability to move became better. So we've developed out of necessity. Our evolution has been out of necessity to stay alive.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if you look at it logically, and just to sort of bring that graph back up a moment whilst we're talking about it, is the fact that if you look at the increases which are here and here, oh, you won't be able to see it there and there.
Yeah,
Um, you know, you can see that that's the anomaly, and
yes,
you can even make an argument that that is natural, but then
yeah,
that's another anomaly, and there has to be some determining factor there
yeah,
to cause that.
yeah,
Um, but looking at the sort of situational stuff,
mhm,
with if you're out on the plains as a Neanderthal and you're sharing, we know now through sort of archaeological digs and stuff, we're sharing the plains and home with the short-faced bear, which
mhm.
was fucking 12 foot tall and like scary
It
looking thing.
sounds all cuddly as shit, doesn't it? The short-faced bear, but
I wouldn't want to. Yeah, I wouldn't want to cuddle one.
no,
Saber-toothed tigers, and then you've got the even though they wouldn't eat you, but the large ground sloths could
mhm,
probably kill you. Everything seemed to be larger and bigger and
mm,
meaner than we were.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you had to think on your goddamn feet, otherwise you'd be dead.
Absolutely, and that was his theory that we evolved because of our environment. Now we no longer, and one of the theories that this BME International came up with, or BME Medical came up with, is the reason that cranial graph is now on the downstroke, if you like, is that we no longer needed to develop at such a rapid pace to stay alive and evolve to become the apex
Mm.
species on the planet. And what's now governing our environment is what we can do, where science has taken us. And I think it was the CEO of Motorola once said, we shape the things we make and thereafter they shape us.
Yeah.
So now, at one point, if you were short sighted, you were in shit because something would swoop down, pick you up, and have you for tea.
Yeah.
Whereas now we have laser eye surgery. Women that had problems with pregnancy, the likelihood is they would die. Now, we have cesarean sections. We
And
have wonderful
it's
advances in medicine, so
it's
we don't
really
need
mad.
to evolve in that way anymore.
It's really mad to think that this is a relatively recent thing as well, in terms of the fact that it would have only been 100 years ago that if there was a problem in pregnancy, you've got a very high chance of losing both the baby and the
Yeah,
mother.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um, and like when was it? Was it? I saw something the other day. Was it like 1930s, 1940s, where I'm going to butcher this, so I'm going to search it. But it was something. It was to do with
Facts matter. Remember,
I
facts
know,
matter.
of course they do. I don't want to be uh, done through digital ID for malinformation. Um, but the washing of hands in surgery
Mm.
was a really
It's a new thing. It's a new concept.
very new thing, which was so shocking to me. So it says, where was it? When was?
Well, this is because we didn't understand the concept of germs, of course. And
Yes.
when somebody first postulated that germs existed, they were only way to describe them they were small animals that you can't see.
Yeah.
So,
So
so people imagined looking through a microscope and seeing elephants and zebras and monkeys and shit walking about.
which is in essence, if you see a water bear, very, very similar.
Yeah.
But so the introduction of hand washing in surgery began with I'm going to butcher this name as Ignaz Semmelweis in
Hmm.
1847. That's you
It's
know,
new.
it's so new that,
Mm,
we take for granted in terms of the fact that, yeah, well, if you've got shit on your hands, you don't go delving around in somebody's guts.
mm,
You give them a wash, and
mm.
that just wasn't a thing beforehand.
Yeah.
Which is really really bonkers. In the morning when I have my shower in the morning, I think, only 50 years ago, maybe a bit more, 60 years ago, this didn't exist.
No,
A hot shower wasn't a thing,
no.
and
Sunday night
it's
was bath night.
yeah, and it's
That was it.
so mad, a convenience that people take for granted every single day. And it is a pure. I love a shower. I never. Sometimes I never want to get in one because I can't be bothered. But then when I'm in, I never want to get out. But it's something that just wasn't a thing sort of 50,
Mm.
60 years ago. Whereas now, like, it's just taken for granted. And I think the danger that we've got, and bringing it back to sort of the mushrooms and the cranial size and so on and so forth, is the fact that if we keep on limiting our exploration in areas like fungi medicine, in
We're
natural
doomed.
homeopathy, yeah,
We're doomed.
we're bollocks.
No,
One of the
ultimately we're doomed.
one of the worst things, and I think we can all agree. I even think the church agrees, when they did all the book burnings and sort of the holding back of science because it was science against the church, was one of the worst things to ever happen to humankind.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look at something like penicillin
Yeah,
to realize how important fungal medication is. So, and I feel quite sorry actually for penicillin. It gets a really bad name. And it was poorly attributed to Fleming, of course. It was always thought, Fleming discovered penicillin, and he did. He's quite right. But
yeah.
actually, that's about as far as he got with it. And it was actually a lady in America called Mary Hunt, who, whether it be just a laugh or rampant misogyny, she was actually known as Moldy Mary, and which is rather unfortunate. But yeah, so Mary Hunt basically, the penicillin or the penicillin or penicillium mold that Fleming founded, yes, very important, absolutely wonderful thing, but it couldn't be replicated in any great form. So it had no real world benefit or application to it. So Mary Hunt, poor Moldy Mary, she discovered this penicillium mold on a cantilever melon at a farmer's market, took it back to her team that she was working with in her lab in America, realized that they could then synthesize this penicillium strain. And lo and behold, without that, it is not unfair to underestimate or overplay the importance of that. You could imagine how many lives would have been lost to infection alone during the World War
Oh, pretty much
without
everyone.
penicillin. So,
Yeah.
the and I think, to kind of take your point, I think we are absolutely at the tip of the spear when it comes to understanding all the little nuanced and equally huge areas of fungal medicine.
Mm.
And I think in 10 years' time, it will be interesting to look back now and see where we were versus where we're at in terms of neuroscience, in terms of disease eradication, in terms of remapping of the brain, in terms of electronics. There's some early research being done about creating circuit boards
Mm.
with mycelium instead of
Wh-
electronics.
Well, that
Now,
brings you to the Tokyo Underground. Was it the Tokyo
experiment, yeah,
Underground?
yeah, it was the Tokyo Underground experiment where they
Unbelievable.
phenomenal. So for
I
those of
mean,
you, I don't know if you've got a
let me see if
graphic
I
on
can
it.
let me see if I can find it, because this
Find a
I
graphic,
remember reading this and thinking,
and
um,
this kind of
it's.
plays into
I
how
thought it was
intelligent.
fake.
No, no, it was genuine. So this plays into the whole World Wide Web and the interconnectedness of everything. As we are as humans, we're all connected, and fungi kind of lead the way in that. And they are. There's so much evidence now about this thing known as the Wood Wide Web, where trees are connected to fungi and fungi are connected to plants, etc., etc. And without fungi, no human could ever exist. They are the
Yeah.
great rotters. They are the bioremediators of life. And fungi first colonized the earth. How they did it, we're not quite sure. So for those of you who can see it, this is a graphic of it was a slime mold that was used to map out the Tokyo Underground in a much more efficient way, and it was never designed. They basically put, I think it was
Yeah, they put like
a food
oats,
source
food source at each sort of
at
station,
each
didn't
node
they?
where the station would be, and the slime mold mapped out the best and most efficient route between each of those points.
Which is, I mean, and I remember listening to a thing with Paul Stamets where he was talking about how um, there's a mycelium matting in North America, which is something
It's
like
in
20.
Oregon. Yeah,
Yeah,
so the largest living organism on Earth is a honey fungus, Amelia malea honey fungus. That the You kind of have to understand the
soil
morphology
makeup.
of
Yeah.
mushrooms. Is that mycelium, which is effectively the root structure of mushrooms,
That's the white. It's the white
of
stuff,
fungi.
basically, the
It's the
white
white
stringy
webby
stuff.
stuff underground.
Yeah.
So the mushrooms that we see above ground actually only constitute between 1% and 5% of the entire size of mycelium, the fungus in general. So all fungus is mushroom, not all mushrooms is fungus. Mushrooms are just the fruiting body. So the
Yeah.
analogy I like to use is an apple tree. Mycelium is the tree, apples are the mushrooms. And it's
Yeah.
the largest living organism that was mapped from a genetic point of view. They tracked it from one end to the other end and top to bottom. And it's in a forest in Oregon, and it's 2,385 acres in sight. One
Which,
organism.
which,
One organism.
when you partner that with what we've just sort of discussed in regards to, it is a very credible argument for sentience
Mm-hmm.
to an extent. Now, an organism which is that large that has an argument, quite legitimate argument for being sentient,
Yeah.
should be should be studied to the ends of the earth. Being, it should be our maniacal overlord because it's the largest frigging thing going. And
What will really blow your mind is that organism is one cell wall thick.
which, yeah,
One cell wall thick.
which is hard to even well, you can't.
It,
It's
it's
almost like saying somebody's a billionaire. You can't quite comprehend
Yeah,
how much
and there are
or
other
how thin
figures
that
that
is.
there are figures within the mycelium world that absolutely blow you away. So one is that if you put your foot in a forest and you took all of the mycelium from underneath your foot and laid it out end to end, it'd be approximately 350 miles long.
Wow.
If you took all of the mycelium, which is made up of little things called hyphae, but if you took all of the mycelium in the world and laid it end to end, it would reach, they postulate, to somewhere about halfway to the edge of the known galaxy, which is 4.5 quadrillion miles.
But well,
You
we
can't
did.
get your fucking head around a number
No,
like
well,
that. Let's be absolutely fair.
we did it. So my daughter had she does like a topic at school
Mm,
every month, and we decided one month to do the James Webb Telescope because
yeah.
it was just when like the photos of the nebulas started
Hmm.
coming out, and I said we were creating some facts, and it's 14.8 billion light years. That's the edge of the unit. It's seen the dawn of time,
Mm.
4.8 billion years. And my daughter, being my daughter, said, "Well, how far is that?" And I thought, in fact, I don't actually know. So then I looked into it, and one light year is approximately 5.2 trillion miles.
Hmm.
So it's 5.2 trillion miles times 14.8 billion. And when you start sort of, I tried to put it on a calculator, and the calculator nearly
There's
exploded.
not enough zeros.
You can't quite comprehend
No, no.
and this is, it brings you to, the point, if there wasn't any fungi, the world would die.
Hmm.
Is I see it now. There's a wood where I go walk the dog every morning, and there's tree stumps that are still alive,
Hmm.
and them tree stumps are kept. I obviously, as you do it, 1 a.m. in the morning and start going down the rabbit holes, I now know that them tree stumps are kept alive because of the mycelium matting that's underneath, taking nutrients from the other trees,
And
saying,
feeding it.
listen, you've got enough to live. We're going to take this over here to keep this stump
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
Now, if that isn't a caretaker of the forest or a caretaker of the
It's
wild,
an intelligence that we can't understand just
no.
yet.
And I don't.
Yeah.
I think it's something that maybe we've been ignorant to, and maybe it links into the psilocybin of ego death. Is like if your ego does die, maybe you'll shut the fuck up and listen.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at, and it's quite analogous, that if you look at how mycelium, and so the birth of the planet was very simple, big hot bang, things span around, became a circle, became a planet, and all you had was water and rock. That was it. And then mycelium came around, or sorry, yeah, so mycelial spores came around, and mycelium has the ability to break down rock, has an enzyme in it that can eat rock.
Oh, there's one sorry to there's
So
one recently that's doing the radiation in Chernobyl.
yeah, reactor 4 in Chernobyl is actually the I think radiostasis. I think it's called. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but yeah, it's eating radiation as a food source.
Which is unbelievable. Sorry, go on. We'll
Mind
we'll
blow.
touch on that.
Yeah. So basically, mycelium releases enzymes that break down rock. The rock then became soil, and when the green ooze that was in the ocean or the water sources tried to come onto land, it couldn't. It had no root structure. So mycelium didn't go, I'm going back to what we said earlier on about the death of ego, didn't go, fuck you, I'm going to keep all this for myself. It said, here, have a root structure, have this mycelium, and this green goo got onto the earth, got into soil, and started to be fed in a very kind of symbiotic relationship. So mycelium gave it a root structure almost and fed it nutrients. In return, the green ooze gave back fats and sugars, etc., to the mycelium, and they both lived happily ever after. At one point, the largest thing on Earth was actually a fungal form called prototaxites, which, going back to figures that will blow your head, this was a mushroom. Unlike anything you've probably ever seen, it was actually looked more like cordyceps than a traditional mushroom with a cap, and they were approximately 9 meters tall, so 27-foot tall
Wow.
mushrooms. Could you imagine being able to? I mean, talk about Alice in Wonderland going through the looking glass, walking through a forest that was made up of 9 meter tall mushrooms. What a
That's
world that would have been.
it's it's hard. Well, it's almost impossible to sort of get your head round.
And the reason it was called prototaxites was proto being like first or new, and taxites. So it actually comes from Taxus baccata, the yew tree, because when early scientists and explorers and archaeologists found the fossil remains, they assumed it was a tree and they thought it was a conifer.
Right.
So it was the Taxus, the yew tree. And it wasn't until later, when we started looking at things a bit closer through the lens of science, we started to see the cell formation within those fossils, that it was actually a fungal cell rather than a tree cell. We then realized, shit, hang on, this isn't a tree. This is actually, it was a 9 meter tall mushroom.
Wow. Oh, I'll just bring it up here actually, and then shit, spunkers. Um,
Is there a graphic coming?
there is, yeah. Just bear with me one moment. Sorry, I was just sort of taken aback by it then in terms of the size because it doesn't
It's
actually,
huge.
yeah, it doesn't actually look like what you'd expect a mushroom to look like.
No,
Um,
there you go. So it looks more akin to something like
a coral.
a cordyceps or a coral, which is, I mean, a
Hmm.
cordyceps is a fascinating mushroom to study, fascinating. And it has an intelligence.
But
100% cordyceps has an intelligence, but yeah, they're phenomenal things. And
now,
mushrooms are the great bioremediators. They're now using mushrooms to, as I said, reactor 4 in Chernobyl. It's eating seeing that they're spraying mushroom spores onto the plastic islands that are floating around in the oceans that will eat those plastics. Mushrooms love sugar, carbon,
Oh, I
plastics,
saw that one as well.
hydrocarbons.
Yeah,
They will eat the plastics, but they don't eat it and then kind of poop out microplastics. They eat the whole thing. They make
yeah.
use of the entire thing. So
So
there is no waste product.
I think the danger that I see, and this is the sort of this is the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist coming out of me, because what what happened obviously with hemp, um,
Yeah.
it was demonized and sort of shunned by the oil industry and the
Mm-hmm.
petroleum industry, knowing that it would absolutely decimate them in every aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and the petroleum industry wouldn't exist now. So things like Vaseline and plastics and
Mm-hmm.
all these things that people take for granted.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I've been drinking out of a plastic cup and a plastic bottle, and they are conveniences, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't get away from them. But and I think it's becoming more mainstream now in terms of hemp plastics, hemp
Yeah.
fabrics, hempcrete in construction.
Mm-hmm.
The insulation properties of hemp. It's so fiber, and not just that, in terms of how quickly it grows.
Yeah.
An understanding that hemp isn't a nasty, naughty thing, because
Mm-hmm.
hemp is the male version of the sativa plant,
Yeah.
which doesn't produce any THC, which is the actual psychoactive
Mm-hmm.
chemical within what people know as marijuana or
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot. Um, it I'm concerned that with mushrooms and with fungi, and I think you're right in saying with the internet as it is at the minute, and almost them civil scientists that
Mm-hmm.
are or citizen scientists you mentioned. I think it'd be really difficult for them to pull that kind of propaganda trick
Yeah.
again.
I think the thing with the internet now, as you said, it is a very double edged sword, and there's lots of twos and or fours and against throughout the digital world. But I think we are at a stage in terms of citizen science and freedom of information that the cork is out of the bottle, and
Yeah,
you can never put it back in.
no,
It's
I
impossible to put that cork back in the bottle. There is medicines from fungi. There is packaging materials that are replacing plastics from fungi. There are structures being built from mycelium.
well, Paul
There is,
Stamets has a hat made out of fungi, doesn't he?
yeah,
Yes.
it's a very interesting fungi. Firmus fermentarius, which is the horse's hoof fungi.
Oh, yeah, we look. I
That
see that. Anybody that goes out walking in the woods in England
if you see a
will
silver
have
birch
seen
tree,
it.
yeah,
They will
yeah,
have seen it.
yeah, and it's been used for thousands of years, and it's actually there was one of my favorite stories is how we know that fungi was used, going back to what we said earlier on, was used thousands of years ago, because there was a chap called Ötzi the Iceman who was found in the Italian Alps, and he was frozen in a glacier. And it's
Yeah.
quite a grim thing to look at. If you ever pull up a graphic of that, it
Oh,
looks
God.
like when they
Uts.
found him, he looked a little bit like chewing tobacco or biltong or
Ut,
beef jerky or something.
Utsi the Iceman, did you say?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure Google will auto
Yeah,
correct
yeah.
you. But when they found him, they actually found two lumps of fungus around his neck. Uh,
Oh,
one
wow.
was one was Firmus fermentarius, what's also known as the tinder fungus, because it contains a
Yes.
layer within inside it called the trama layer, and you can scratch that, and it's a very fine fluff like velvet. There we go. And you can drop a very vague spark onto that, and it will create fire. The other thing that they found on him was birch polypore. Again, a very, very, very common. I don't know if you can pull it up, but there's
Oh, that is grim. However,
um, there was a graphic a bit further back there. Kind of, I don't know if it's on your screen, the kind of bottom right one where it shows his kit.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you can pull that
Just
up.
pull that up.
Yeah, so the top left, as we kind of look at it.
Oh, wow. So that's how they
Yeah,
found him.
that's how he was found. So he looks a little bit like biltong or beef jerky when they found him. But his
But there you
kit.
go.
So there, that graphic there. So the top left, the two little round white things on a leather
Yeah.
thong. One is Firmus fermentarius, this tinder fungus, and the other one was birch polypore.
Wow.
which is a very, very common fungus throughout Britain. If you see a dead or dying silver birch tree and this kind of big bracket fungus that grows out the side of it, that's birch polypi. Has 101 different uses. But the one that he was using it for was as an anti-parasitic.
Wow.
And don't really want to get into the whole conversation around how shit our food and water is at the moment because
Oh,
they're being full of parasites. But
we'll be here till tomorrow if we get
oh
into
yeah,
that, Adrian.
it'll be a 9 hour podcast. But essentially, he was using that to what they believe was to treat parasites in his body because they did find parasite eggs within his
Wow.
gut lining. Whenever I give whenever I give my workshops and talks about it, I love this story because it allows me to tell my one and only joke about mushrooms, which is how when they found Tutankhamun's and the pharaohs when they
Hmm.
found their tombs and the curse of the mummies, where people would die very shortly afterwards, had nothing to do with the curse of the mummies, but it was actually a mold spore called Aspergillus that had settled in the tomb. And then when we went in and Carnarvon disturbed it, or whatever, which explorer, kind of disturbed it, they breathed in these mold spores and it created horrible things in the body and we ended up dying. So those Egyptian mummies were known as dry mummies because of the very nature of them. And Otzi the Iceman was known as a wet mummy because of where he was found. And it's always a thing that if you're ever going to do some research, never, ever Google wet mummy,
Oh, definitely not.
especially not on a works computer. Otherwise, HR will be on the phone to you fairly quickly, I would think. So that's my one and only fungi joke, by the way.
It's a good one. It's a good one. You
It's
keep
a
that one.
cracker.
It's a
Thank you.
good one. But so they found him 5,000 years old.
Yeah,
That's how. That's
so they think he was laid there about, well, he ended up there about 3,700 years ago is what they think.
which
When they X-rayed him or MRI scanned him, they actually think that he was murdered. They think he was chased down and murdered
right.
because they found, I think it was 2 arrowheads in his back.
Which is, I mean, and and this sort of brings around the sort of hypocrisy of some boffin at a desk in the middle of Europe. It'll be in the, where is it, Bruges or where's
Brussels.
it? Brussels, and the Strasbourg is the other one where they spend most of the month. Um, Sat behind a desk that's probably doesn't eat chestnut or button mushrooms, making a decision when poor old Otzi was using them, 4,000 years ago.
Yeah. But,
Um,
but but isn't it interesting, going back to the graphic about human development, is that somebody that had they didn't know what science was, they didn't know what germs
no,
was, they didn't understand what antibiotics was, they didn't understand what antiparasitics were. They knew just by evolution that eating that mushroom helped them.
yeah, and
Didn't
I
understand
think,
the why, the wherefores, the sciences. They just knew that mushroom, when ingested, could help them.
that says a lot in terms of the fact that we as sort of Homo sapiens and masters of the universe, masters of the planet, and we're full of our own self-importance quite a lot of the time, is the fact that we like to put little nice labels on things. And coming back all the way to the beginning, in reality, we know fuck all. We
No,
actually know
we are
a lot less
babies.
than, a lot less than what we believe. And it brings you into the realm of sort of, one of my favorite questions to debate and speak about is if we're alone in the universe and so on and so forth. And my answer always is the fact that you must be so full of self-importance to think that we are alone and we are it,
Yeah,
based on numbers alone.
yeah.
We just discussed in terms of how far away the edge of the universe is, and then you look at the James Webb Telescope that discovered that it was pointed at something the size of, I think it was a 20 pence piece, 20 meters away from your face,
Mm-hmm.
to where humans thought nothing was.
Yeah,
And then if you see
yeah.
some of the images that have come out of that, is just unbelievable. Like the nebula is amazing, and and this is the thing in terms of the fact that people like Otzi might not have had a name for science, might not have had any microscopes to discover what was going on at cellular level,
Yeah,
but had far more knowledge than any of the scientists that have microscopes or anything today.
for sure. And I think that's probably, it's a really good point to kind of end the how important fungi question is that fungi actually prove the existence of life in the universe.
Hmm.
Because when, as we say, going back to how the earth was formed, okay, well, we've got rock and we've got, water. Where did the other bits come from? Because everything was just too hot to create life. So where did it come from? So there's this theory called panspermia, which is where
Yes.
meteorites and stuff would crash onto the earth that were carrying bacteria, mycelial spores, etc., and they were what first colonized the earth. Now, if you subscribe to the theory of panspermia, which science does, it is what it is.
It's got a name, it's got a label.
Yeah.
It's accepted.
So if you assume that a meteorite or an asteroid or whatever landed on Earth or hit the Earth that had bacteria on, where did that bacteria come from?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to assume that if panspermia theory is correct, life has to exist somewhere else in the universe in whatever form. And I'm not talking about, some great evolved species of, ETs or whatever,
No.
but life in some form has to exist elsewhere in the universe for it to have come from there to land
Here.
on Earth.
Which
Has to have done.
it's bonkers when I love it's I'm not going to sleep tonight because I'm going to end up like going down the routes and
Welcome
ruminating
to my
on
world.
everything. I know it's not a bad world to be in. To
It's
be
all
fair,
right. It's okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we'll end on that, brother. I massively appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
It's awesome to speak to you, as it always is.
Thank you so
And
much.
and in 6 months' time, when we've got the studio, hopefully we'll get together and we'll get you back on and
I'd love to come back on.
see how far it's advanced in because it seems at the minute, especially from a scientific perspective, something is advancing on a weekly basis.
It is rapid. I mean, it is literally, the reports I read, and I read all the reports because I've got no life. I read everything, and it is literally on a week by week, certainly month by month basis that new information, new discoveries, new bits of the puzzle are being found out to do with fungi and just how important they are. And I think I said earlier on, we are at the very tip of the spear in terms of finding out what the future has in store for us.
Well, grab hold of that spear, get it thrown, pierce any piece of red tape or red cloth that anybody can put in the way, and be
Cut
that
through the shit with the
trailblazer.
spear.
100%. So before we go, is there any socials? Obviously, the Pendle Mushroom Company. If anybody out there is interested, I can 100% vouch for the tinctures. And the science behind it. Get over to Holden Brook Nurseries if you're up in the northwest of England. Holden Clough, that's the one. And visit Aid and visit and see what he does.
Yeah, I'm very much about transparency. So if anybody, you don't need to book, you don't need to pay. If you want to come and see what I'm doing for the day, turn up. Just come to Holden Clough and just, come and spend the day with me, learn, and see what I'm doing.
On Instagram, it's the Pendle Mushroom Company.
Yeah.
I'm presuming Facebook and everything is the same
they're
as
all
well.
the same, yeah.
And yeah, brilliant, brother. Have a great great evening.
Thank you so much.
Awesome to speak to you, and catch you soon.
All right, take care, buddy. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.